What is going on, everyone? Welcome in to Studs and Duds, the most comprehensive NFL player review series on the internet. I am your host, Marcus Whitman. Today we have the AFC edition of our season finale on Studs and Duds. We're going to get right into it, but first I do ask, this series takes a lot of time and effort from me, so if you could return the favor for just a second, hit that like button down below. It really does help support my channel and this series. If you enjoy Studs and Duds, it's a great way to support it. Takes just a second. And if this is your first time in, what we're going to do here today, we're going to be going team by team, talking about the rising and falling players from around the NFL. And while we do that, I will be showing you the ratings changes from my own custom Madden roster, a roster I've been making for the community since 2016. And I always like to tell people, these ratings, while coming from a video game, do show how I perceive these players in real life. And these ratings changes are a reflection of my own film study, analysis, and research. So let's go ahead and get started. Kicking things off with the Cincinnati Bengals in the AFC North, and really a lot of just defense. I think the offense over the last month or so, they've either been what we know these guys to be or potentially like slightly worse, but just not a whole lot to really add to what they've accomplished on the offensive side of the ball this year, other than Mitchell Wilcox with Hayden Hurst missing some time, stepped in and was fine at tight end, going to go up a little bit. Got some receptions in there, blocking okay, but yeah, this defense has really impressed, especially over the last month or so, but on the season as a whole, they've stood out again for the second year in a row. Lou Anarumo just does such a good job over there in Cincinnati, but the star of the month is going to be DJ Reader. You can't watch a Bengals game without admiring DJ Reader, and we talked this player up in my Bengals deep dive coming into the year about how underrated he was and how he really should be in the conversation for the best run defending nose tackle in the NFL. Yes, up there with someone like Vita Vea, and that has aged quite well to the point where now that the Bengals have continued to have such a large spotlight like the Bucs have, people notice DJ Reader, and he is just everywhere. He two gaps, you can't move him. If he happens to get one-on-one, he can shed blocks with ease. He maintains his gap discipline. I just don't think there's anybody in the league doing it better as a run defender than DJ Reader, and he's also relatively disruptive as a pass rusher as well. You look at what like Dexter Lawrence has been for the New York Giants, and certainly that's a whole nother conversation about how good he's been. But if DJ Reader had played the entire season, I think you might be talking about a nice little comparison there between those two guys. But since Reader's been back about midway through the season, this defense has, obviously, as you can see here, a lot of guys going up, has really taken that next step and looks like a championship caliber defense despite losing their premium corner in Chidobe Awuzie. Now, the nice thing about DJ Reader is he opens things up for everybody else. Josh Tupou doesn't have to be a three-down, well, I'm not going to say he was a three-down D tackle before, but he doesn't have to be their primary nose tackle. He can get less reps and rotate more, and Tupou has had some good seasons in the NFL as that space eater. He's just a good backup to DJ Reader. Kind of a very poor man's version there, 340 pounds, very similar size profile. He's been doing his job well enough, but I think the biggest beneficiaries here of DJ Reader's return are these next two players right here, BJ Hill and Zachary Carter, their third-round pick. And BJ Hill really came on last year after the Bengals traded for him, and that still remains one of the best value trades we've seen in recent memory. This team traded Billy Turner for him, and he's just a really good starting defensive tackle, the ideal number 2. And now that Reader's back, BJ Hill is playing almost exclusively 3 technique, where he can split gaps and not have to face as many double teams. And in turn, you're seeing more defensive stops, more pressures, and just better overall play from BJ Hill, who's not a number 1 defensive tackle, but is absolutely a number 2. So BJ Hill's going to get a little love here. And then Zachary Carter is starting to play well as well. I think, getting just the overall rotation has enhanced all these guys here for sure since Reeder's return. But I also think Carter himself is just playing with better discipline, playing with better strength. You're seeing him at least step in a rotation and be serviceable against the run, whereas kind of to start the year, not so much for a 3rd-round pick out of Florida that I've been quite harsh on. But credit where credit's due, Zachary Carter has earned a slight role on this playoff defense. And then we got to talk about these edge players as well, although I do have a note on Jay Tufele. Just another guy in this rotation. Was a fascinating underclassman that declared out of USC, along with Marlon Tuipulotu, kind of similar players. I think it was like a 4th-round pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars and ended up climbing his way up the practice squad here in Cincinnati. But that's another player that's gotten in on some passing downs and has actually had a couple of just notable pass rush wins out there. Very minimal snaps, but someone to keep an eye on that is rated as a 69 for me for someone that hasn't really played. I liked him coming out of USC as a value pick, and just might be another find for this Bengals front office that has quietly been one of the best in the league. But let's talk about the edge group. Joseph Osai, this is huge, man. Absolutely huge. Talk about a player that slipped in the draft. I think I had a 1st to a 2nd round grade on Joseph Osai. I certainly consistently had him in the 1st round of several mock drafts, and if he didn't go in the 1st, he didn't last long into the 2nd. Athletic guy out of Texas with a lot of just bend and tenacity to get after the quarterback. Physically speaking, I don't think Trey Hendrickson is the worst pro comp for Osai. He's not quite as big, but just similar kind of get off and juice around the corner. And Hendrickson goes down for a couple of weeks. And Osai, we said it when that happened. I think both those edge rushers actually went down in spurts because Sam Hubbard missed time too. But Osai has really stepped it up, especially these last 2 weeks. 2 sacks, 12 pressures, just looking like that athletic prospect out of Texas that a lot of people liked. And if they stole a potential starting edge player here in the 3rd round, that's just adding insult to injury with how much depth and talent this defensive line has. But Trey Hendrickson himself needs to get more respect here. You guys saw my power rankings, my positional power rankings from a week ago on the edge players. Trey Hendrickson just cracked the top 10. He's having an awesome season. The pass rush win rate. But Trey Hendrickson himself needs to get a little bit of love here. Just having another awesome season. Has missed a little bit of time in there, but talk about value free agent signings, man. He's been a true number 1 pass rusher for the Bengals. Honestly, probably still underrated. And just they love having him out there as their number 1 guy. What a move to go get him. But let's move to the back end a little bit here. Jermaine Pratt, the linebacker in a contract year, having his best season on his career. And we see this quite a lot. Mid-round linebackers taking several years to really get up to speed, process the game at a high level. And you're seeing him in coverage, really protecting the middle of the field quite well, maybe even more so than Logan Wilson. But the biggest thing for Jermaine Pratt is this is a linebacker that has missed a lot of tackles in his time in Cincinnati, not this year. The last couple of years, a missed tackle percentage of 12%, 13%, all the way down to just under 6% this year, cutting that in half, earning himself some money, I would guess, probably from Cincinnati here, because they love running these just nickel packages and letting these 2 linebackers be versatile on either side of the field. And Logan Wilson's a big part of that as well. He's just awesome. There's not a whole lot left to say about Logan Wilson. He just continues to climb. A machine as far as tackling consistency. That's another player that in his rookie season, he did have actually some ugly missed tackles. Not so much this year. His missed tackle percentage even lower than Jermaine Pratt. He's only missed 3% of his tackles this year. That's like towards the top of the league. He's been rangy in coverage. He's been athletic and tough in run defense. And just, you can tell the physicality that this defense has and the size and mental toughness that these 2 linebackers bring in the second level is a huge part of everything that this defense is able to do. And then into the secondary, Cam Taylor-Britt, the rookie, really stepping up, between him and Joseph Asai. That's how you can weather the storm on big injuries to critical players. And they obviously lose Chidobe Awuzie, who was off to an excellent start. And they needed the second-round pick, Cam Taylor-Britt, who I viewed as a little bit more raw coming out of Nebraska. He's really stepped up, and he has been far from perfect. He's had his losses, just as any rookie cornerback is going to have. But he certainly has not been a liability to the point where it's held this defense back. And he's been really tough against the run, too. So I just have really liked what I've seen from Cam Taylor-Britt. And then Trey Flowers, the former starter for the Seattle Seahawks, he's actually made a lot of plays as that tight end eraser. They bring him in their dime packages. They love to get into 3 or 4 man rush packages and bring him in as sometimes a 7th defensive back. And he's just a good matchup player. He's never going to be a starter in the NFL. That ship has sailed. He just doesn't have the tools to be a slot or perimeter starting corner. But, he's more of a safety than a corner. But they just, like I said, they bring him in, they match him up on either big receivers or tight ends. And he's done a great job in that role. And then Mike Hilton, to me, has popped, having his best season. Coverage has always been pretty solid for Mike Hilton. He's not the fastest guy or the biggest guy. He's just a, gritty slot corner. But tackling for Mike Hilton has never really been a huge strong suit for him. And you got to remember, this is a big part of playing slot corner, especially if you're going to be a team that prides itself on its run defense like Cincinnati does. And he's taken a new level. Reminds me so much of what K'Wan Williams was able to provide for that 49ers team. When you have a slot corner playing like this, who's getting off blocks and coming downhill and tackling as well as he's doing, it just allows you to live in nickel defense, which makes you so much more dangerous. And Mike Hilton just is another piece here that allows them to do everything they want to do. Now, before we get to our next team here, I got to tell you guys about Underdog Fantasy. I'm sure you guys have all seen the screenshots of their daily pick'em contests, and I love those. But now that playoffs are here, well, you've got a few days left to head to Underdog and sign up for their playoff best ball contest, where you are drafting new teams. If you're like me and you went 0 for 4 in your fantasy playoffs, well, I'm not ready to be done with fantasy football, so I'm going to go play some playoff best ball at Underdog Fantasy, where you're drafting new teams for massive payouts. And the coolest thing to me is you need to not just draft the players that'll do the best, but the players on the teams that will do the best. So it's like a double predictive thing that I'm just super looking forward to. So this is all at Underdog Fantasy. I vouch for them. I swear by Underdog. I've been playing all year long, and now you can too. If you sign up at Underdog Fantasy using promo code TFG, they will match up to $100 on your first deposit. That is promo code TFG at Underdog Fantasy. Then on to Cleveland, where it's been an interesting, really last month since Deshaun Watson came back, where the offense has actually really struggled more with Deshaun Watson in there. And let's just start there on the offensive side of the ball. We'll circle back to our star of the month there with Martin Emerson. But look, Watson got 6 starts and he was really bad. Now, there's plenty of excuses there, right? Didn't get the first team reps throughout the season, hasn't played in 2 years, yada, yada, yada. I get it. We're not ruling out Deshaun Watson. I agree. Like, those are legitimate excuses, but here's the deal, man. We had him rated as one of the top cornerbacks in the NFL, and since his return, he has legitimately been one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL, struggling to consistently play in structure, a ratio of just 3 big-time throws to 9 turnover-worthy plays, the team's inability to finish in the red zone, and their overall points per game. Look, the reality is he has sucked since he came back. And I'm not saying that because I want him to fail, which I do, but it's just the reality of the situation. Just like Aaron Rodgers and his contract extension has been a disappointment. Just like Russell Wilson and his contract extension has been a disappointment. Deshaun Watson has seen similar results out the gate in Cleveland. Now, we'll see what this looks like next year. Still plenty of opportunities in front of Deshaun Watson. He's, 26, 27 years old, but there's no way around it. He just has not played well this season, and 6 starts is enough for me to say that this is a worse version of Deshaun Watson than what we remember 2 years ago when he last played football. And I'm very fascinated to see if this is just an excuse if he can rebound, or is this who he is now? Because if it is, that is objectively hilarious that the Browns paid so much for this quarterback, who is worse than Jacoby Brissett, kind of like by far. Now, he's not getting the most help out there. Some of these guys in the offense are going to go down here. You see David Bell, mid-round pick. I really did not like David Bell. I had a 6th-round pick on this player and did not like this draft selection. It's just, you at some point have to have some speed in the NFL. You're talking about a receiver here with, I don't know, 4.6, 4.7 speed. He's been playing, but under 1 yard per route run, which is really bad. He's at 0.7. He's just been a complete non-factor, hasn't been able to get open for the quarterback, hasn't come down with tough catches, just doesn't really have it out the gate as a rookie. So I thought, what I did say about him is that he is a high floor player. I compared him to Rashad Higgins. I thought he would at least step in and be a good ball winner, separate in the short to intermediate game. And he isn't even doing that, right? So that 72 had to come down. And then another guy on the offensive line, Wyatt Teller. I love Wyatt Teller, but they have gotten a little bit away from that dedicated wide zone run game and a little bit away from the under center gap scheme stuff that, Wyatt Teller pulling on the move is such a threat. And you've seen the run block grades come down as the Browns have gone more under center. But inversely, because they are throwing the ball out of shotgun more often, it is being revealed that Wyatt Teller is just a mediocre pass protector. Mediocre is harsh. He's average. He's adequate, but he's not a superstar pass protector. And in this version of this offense, they're not getting the most out of Wyatt Teller, so he's going to come down a little bit. But one guy on the offense is going to go up, James Hudson, really athletic tackle prospect out of the University of Cincinnati, very new to the position, was drafted, 5th, 6th round. And I saw him in person at the Senior Bowl, and he was getting worked in his pass protection technique. But you could see the foot speed. A guy that played defensive tackle at Michigan made the conversion transferring to Cincinnati. So now into year 2 for James Hudson. Gets a start at right tackle in Week 18 and played pretty well. So he's a tradesy guy. Good to see him kind of figuring some stuff out there. But let's talk about the defense, because this has been interesting. And thank God for the Browns fans, they did fire Joe Woods, because I just don't think schematically it makes sense with everything they've got going on. And this is a, well exhausted topic at this point, and he's gone now. So thank goodness. But it is worth noting that the Browns defense has played a lot better over the last 5-6 weeks. This is the second year in a row where Joe Woods' defense turned it on late, but a lot of good players on this defense really stepping up. And I just want to highlight the secondary. Taven Bryan's going to go up there. He's been fine. He's like the only defensive tackle. It seems like he can occasionally get off a block up front there. That's going to be a big need for this team in the offseason. But this secondary is really fun, man. And as you look at them heading into next year, with the way these guys have played next year, with a potential new scheme that might let these guys play more press man coverage, this could be really exciting next year. And, Greg Newsome has been fantastic. His, pass breakup count keeps going up. He's just not really getting beat. First round pick last year. He was outstanding. We're seeing Grant Delpit really emerge. I loved Grant Delpit coming out. He's getting more and more comfortable. He's got, 3 interceptions in the last month. He's been tackling really well, showing that kind of speed and range profile that he has, who was reminiscent of like a poor man's Jamal Adams coming out of LSU. Although I think Delpit's a little bit faster. But yeah, he's playing well. That's exciting for that safety group. Denzel Ward's playing well. He's not going to go up. He's had his ups and downs this year, but over the last 2 months when this defense has played better, he's playing up to his pay grade, where we have him rated as one of the best corners in the NFL. But this has all been building up to rave about Martin Emerson, their 3rd-round rookie corner. And what I love about this, and why this is going to be such an attractive position for incoming defensive coordinators, is similar to a wide receiver core, where you want your deep threat, you want your slot guy, you want your X wide receiver. Well, the Browns have everything here. They have their alpha corner in Denzel Ward. They have just an incredible number 2 corner who might someday be a number 1. And then you have Martin Emerson, who's like their matchup guy. he is big and strong, and you can go press coverage with him and jam and disrupt the timing of routes off the line of scrimmage. This is going to be a really fun secondary for any incoming defensive coordinator to get their hands on. And yeah, that's really all I have to say. But Martin Emerson, 9 pass breakups on his season. And it's been an excellent season for rookie corners. Martin Emerson's going to kind of fly under the radar in a year with Tariq Woolen and Sauce Gardner. But my goodness, did they find someone there in the 3rd round. And he was a talented player out of the SEC. He just didn't have the speed profile that you sometimes look for. But if you're physical, sometimes that's even better. You know, you look at a guy like Xavier Howard, not a bad pro comp for a Martin Emerson. Maybe someday he gets to that point. But yeah, definitely not the worst end of the Browns season. And I will say Watson played better as the games went on up until the last week, I suppose, where he didn't play well against Pittsburgh. But yeah, Cleveland's going to be an interesting team next year for sure. And then the Baltimore Ravens, it's been a fascinating 5 weeks for them as they've been trying to navigate the Lamar Jackson injury, but they've really done an admirable job. I mean, they've had an injury to Rashad Bateman as well, which has been really tough for them. They've found a way to move the ball, and it's not explosive or exciting, but it's worked in spots for them, I suppose. A big part of that is J.K. Dobbins, who I think kind of tried to rush back earlier in the year, just honestly did not look that explosive when he came back earlier in the year, but takes some time to get fully healthy, and boy, oh boy, in this time without Lamar Jackson, he's looked really good. He's breaking more tackles. He's breaking off more explosive runs. Just looks like a good feature back. And hopefully getting Lamar back into the mix and just kind of putting all of these pieces together. It's kind of, in a weird way, coming together as we approach the playoffs. Going to be interesting as they go up against that really good Bengals front here this weekend. It's a battle of titans in a lot of ways with the way they run the ball and the way the Bengals are built up front. It's going to be a matchup to watch for sure. But let's keep going through these players. Unfortunately, Devin Duvernay, his exciting start to the season has really tapered off. He's just not really separating, the route running not really shining through. He is a smaller receiver, can struggle with some of the physical aspects of the position, not winning a ton of tough catches either. So I expect him to continue to play better once Lamar gets back into the mix. But even when Lamar was out there, when he had to be the #1 wide receiver, it just wasn't really in the cards for him. So maybe a little bit of a pump the brakes moment after a good start to the season for Duvernay. Still one of the best punt returners in the league, though. And then really just these frontline blockers have done a great job. And it doesn't always get, you know, the respect. They don't always get the respect they deserve here. But man, I mean, let's just start with the blockers. Josh Oliver has put on 10 pounds. He's been one of the better run blocking tight ends in the league. He has done a great job to really fend off some of these guys on this depth chart and be their kind of go-to blocker in a lot of ways. He is that new Nick Boyle for them. He's not quite as big as Boyle was, but they've released Boyle and they love what they have in Josh Oliver as a blocker, which he has come so far in that regard. He was a horrible blocker coming out of college. So just good to see the mental toughness and development there from him. Then you got Ben Powers continuing to be honestly one of the most locked down pass protecting guards in the league. That's going to be a contract to keep an eye on as we approach free agency here. Kevin Zeitler at his age, honestly having one of his better years in a while. So he's been doing a good job both in pass protection and clearing ways for this run game. And Tyler Linderbaum as well. That's been mostly notable as a run blocker, but they really designed their run game off of his versatility as a blocker. And he's been kicking ass up front, helping this offense stay alive. Now, a couple of other interesting tight end pieces here. Isaiah Likely's going to go up. Another one here. We've covered him pretty in depth over the course of this season. He's just a really nice find in the mid rounds, and he's honestly like maybe their #2 wide receiver in a weird, twisted way as we approach the playoffs here behind Mark Andrews. He ends up catching, what, like 8 passes on 10 targets or something in that Week 18 game against the Bengals. So he continues to impress. And then Charlie Kolar finally gets into the mix here in Week 18. Charlie Kolar was really a draft darling of mine, a draft crush, if you will. Love his size and quickness at his size. Gets in there for some nice catches and even blocks okay in Week 18. Now, I've got him rated quite high for a guy that has only played 30 snaps this year, but good to see the tape kind of reinforced here at the next level, and hopefully that can kickstart something into next year, because I think he's such a talented young tight end. But then we go over to the defensive side of the ball, and that's where we're going to have our star of the month. A couple options here, but we are going to go with Roquan Smith, who had just kind of arrived in our last AFC studs and duds, and we were acknowledging that he was starting to play well, but I hadn't bumped him up yet. But honestly, ever since he arrived in Baltimore, he is right there with Fred Warner for the best linebacker in the NFL. He's been a heat-seeking missile, and not just in run defense, but coming downhill and defending the pass. He's been a secure tackler. He has looked everything like that blue-chip linebacker prospect coming out of Georgia, and they can really design a lot of their coverages around his range at that linebacker position. Their defense, since he arrived, it's as a whole been so much better because they can really pivot around him. And there's other players benefiting here because of Roquan Smith. But not so much with Travis Jones going up here, another draft darling or a draft crush, if you will. Just starting to play better up front, and just a talented young defensive tackle that's getting a limited sample size in Baltimore, but I think he's got a very bright future. He's starting to show some run stops these last few weeks. I think he's got like 5 or 6 defensive stops, which is a lot given his snap count. Patrick Queen was in consideration for star of the month because he's definitely the one that's benefiting the most from Roquan's arrival. Patrick Queen is not the headiest linebacker. He is an absolute risk taker. He plays just like he did at LSU for a defense where they say gamble, make splash plays, try to create turnovers. Well, in the NFL, that has hurt him. But now he has a guy like Roquan Smith next to him who's going to maintain a lot more of that discipline. And that's where you're seeing these explosive interceptions, TFLs, flying to the sidelines, showing out that speed. He's allowed to just play fast and instinctive, and it is the perfect complement to Roquan Smith, the most athletic linebacking duo in the league for sure. So you're seeing in this role, he's really thriving. And what's really fascinating, I want to talk about Kyle Hamilton next, is the Ravens are actually basing their defense, literally their base defense. What they want to go to here is a big nickel defense where Kyle Hamilton is their overhang defender. So he is a hybrid linebacker, safety, slot corner. In fact, the vast majority of his snaps have been actually as a slot corner, where he's lined up a lot of times on slot receivers, but also slot tight ends who are flexed out. He'll come in and play linebacker, but what he's not doing is playing free safety, which I said coming out. You don't want him playing free safety. He's a slow starter. He has long speed, and from a 2-shell assignment, maybe can play a deep half, but using that range and his ability to read the quarterback's eyes and really just play curl flats, hook zones, hard flats, be around the line of scrimmage, contribute as a run defender, and be that two-way player, he's in a dream role in the way that they're using him. And it's been huge that they're able to do that because their cornerback depth sucks. And we'll talk about Brandon Stevens shortly, potentially emerging here, but they've had to base out of 3 safety packages. And without Kyle Hamilton having that range and reach at that really slot corner position in a lot of ways, they might not have a lot of answers defensively if they had to go to a much worse defensive back out there. So he's been really pivotal for what they're able to do. But I also think kind of the range and speed of these linebackers has allowed them to run a lot more mid zones with Kyle Hamilton and protect Hamilton from having to show off the range and get back deep over the top. So it's just been really creative and clever the way that they're structuring this defense. But some of these other defensive backs are playing well too. I mentioned Brandon Stevens. Really the last 2 weeks, he's had a rough season. He's a former, 4th round pick, I think, maybe 3rd round out of SMU. One of those classic height, length, speed, developmental profiles. And in year 2 or 3 here, I can't even remember what year he was, but really finally playing well for multiple weeks in a row. It's like the first time in his career we've seen some real flashes from him, and another guy that as we head into the playoffs, does that allow them to be more versatile with their defense? I like what they're doing with the big nickel stuff, but maybe you don't want Kyle Hamilton out there trying to cover Tyler Boyd next week. Did a good job last week, however, against the Bengals doing that. So I'm just saying it gives them more versatility. And it's just been a fun scheme to really see McDaniels, right? That's the defensive coordinator. McDaniels, McDonald, whichever one it is. It's been fun to see him kind of craft this defense and figure out what works for him in the first year of his tenure, hopefully, in the NFL. Then Chuck Clark as well, really benefiting actually from a player not listed here, returning Marcus Williams. And Chuck Clark had gone down. We had lowered his rating the last 2 episodes of Studs and Duds because he had to play free safety. Marcus Williams missed significant time, and their best answer was Chuck Clark to play free safety, and he really struggled. Was giving up deep completions, and he's not a rangy player. He is a bigger box, strong safety type of guy. And he's in a good role now with Marcus Williams back, where he doesn't have to cover deep thirds. And we're seeing him right back to playing like a really good strong safety, which we know he is. So he's just going to get those ratings points back that we had taken away when we had to watch him play free safety. The only other guy in the notes here is going to be David Ojabo. Talk about a draft crush. There's a lot of those here in Baltimore with how they draft. But he gets in for the first time on the season, gets a sack in his debut. Could he be a little bit of a playoff sleeper? The Ravens are kind of getting healthy just at the right time. Is it a week too late? I don't know. But like I said, they've had a fascinating couple of weeks. It's been a fun team to monitor, even if not necessarily to watch since Lamar went down. But if nothing else, I do want to say this, and I don't know if I want to get into this, but it's just tough with the whole conversation around the offensive scheme, because I do get it. But they have a lot of good players for this scheme offensively, so I wouldn't be stunned if they kind of triple down with the Greg Roman offense. We'll see where it all goes. But you look at some of these tight ends and the way this offense is structured, and if this defense is coming together like that, it's more feasible to go with a high floor, low ceiling offense like the Greg Roman offense kind of entails. But anyway, that's a topic for another day. Let's move on. And then we wrap up the AFC North with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike Tomlin had these boys fired up. They get to 9-8 and survive with a winning record on the season. Not enough to sneak into the playoffs, but a lot of good individual efforts by these players. And our star of the month for the Steelers is going to be Kenny Pickett. There were some good options here, but he played well. He really did. So many people criticized this pick. I was proudly not one of them. I kind of liked the pick. I said it was kind of budget Mac Jones, where you're taking a guy on a rookie contract, a 24-year-old quarterback who can step in, be ready right away, move around, make some plays. And he's been a very serviceable starting level quarterback, and even shown some very clutch moments as well. That end of the game against Baltimore, I mean, you're talking about 2 big time plays, one with his arm where both with his arm, but one really throwing with anticipation and accuracy over the middle of the field, just a dime, and then the game winner to Najee Harris, where he's extending plays and showing off the athleticism and ability to throw on the move. He's a solid quarterback, man. He's got a little bit of an it factor about him. I really think the Steelers, if they can continue to build a team around Kenny Pickett, can be, for what it's worth, a competitive playoff caliber football team with Kenny Pickett on that rookie contract. Now, 3 years from now, if he doesn't turn into something a lot more than what he is this year, then we'll start to have conversations about if they should pay him and yada yada. But for the 20th overall pick in the draft, for a team that was never going to be looking at like a super high-end quarterback prospect, the Steelers, Mike Tomlin hasn't had a losing season in his freaking life. So, you kind of got to take what you can in the draft. And I like where they're at this point in time with Kenny Pickett. And I think Steelers fans are too. But a lot of guys stepping up around him. The run game was much better on this stretch. Najee Harris looking much more like that first-round running back, that high-end number one guy, breaking tackles, the impact that he can make in the receiving game as well. I loved Najee Harris's tape from his rookie season, and I thought he was maybe destined for an ascension this year. The majority of his season has not been great, and we even lowered him earlier on in this series, but looking much more like that rookie version of himself. I'm a big believer in Najee Harris. Kind of reminds me of another Alabama running back in Josh Jacobs, where as soon as the surrounding situation was a little bit better, he emerged as a top 5 back. I think Najee Harris, different style, but equally talented running back in a lot of ways. Then Jaylen Warren, the other running back, still breaking a lot of tackles, been a very good relief pitcher next to Najee Harris. So he's going up for the 4th straight time here in this series. But unfortunately, Deontay Johnson is going to come down. I had very big expectations for Deontay Johnson. I love his game. I still do. But 8 more drops this season, 1 each in the last 3 weeks. He's going to finish this season under 1,000 yards for the first time in a couple of years. His yards per route run is way down. He isn't living up to his pay grade or where we had him rated. Still think he's one of the best route runners in the league, and I hope now that they kind of have Kenny Pickett solidified next year, they can develop a better chemistry as their kind of go-to route runner type with Pickens as the ball winner. I like how these two guys' skill sets are going to play off each other, but as far as this season is concerned, Deontay Johnson was a little bit of a disappointment, but at least you got George Pickens, man. He really solidified himself from a consistency standpoint in this kind of December stretch here. And I think the conversation very much will be not so much if Kenny Pickens, sorry, I'm going to be doing that throughout the years. Not if George Pickens is going to emerge as this team's number 1 wide receiver, more when it's going to happen. Just a little fun tidbit, his spectacular catch rating, because this is based on a Madden roster, is up to a 98, and I really think that is where he shines through the most. Just put the ball in the proximity of George Pickens, and we've said this throughout the year, but he is up there with the greatest receivers I've ever seen as far as ability to high point the ball, track the ball, fight through contact, oftentimes one-hand catch the ball. It's pretty special. So if his route running continues to grow just a little bit, if his release package can be refined, man, the sky is the limit for George Pickens. And then Connor Hayward, what a fascinating player. He is the brother of Cam Hayward on this team. He's like a 6'1", 230-pound hybrid tight end, fullback type. He's just a football player. You can put him out there, run routes. He's got several nice catches throughout the last 5-6 weeks. He's been blocking pretty well. Just a nice little Pittsburgh Steeler, classic football player there. Going to get some respect again this week. And then on the offensive line, Kevin Dotson having a really good year in pass protection. The dude's just been an absolute rock. Hasn't quite been what you would hope he could have developed into as a run blocker, but as long as he's setting his feet and anchoring in pass pro, he is good to go. Let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball now. I want to shout out Larry Ogunjobi, who had a nice little year here. He's more of a splash player. He's kind of a unique defensive tackle. He plays a little bit upright. He's more of an aggressive gap shooter type, but there's value in that. When you have disciplined guys around you like Cameron Hayward, you can play a little bit more like that. And it's not so much that his pass rush productivity is up. He did have an 8 pressure, 1 sack game there, week 18, but as a run defender in this system, he's been much better than he was in Cincinnati. And I love his foot speed and kind of instincts to make splash plays against the run. So he's had a nice little year after the Chicago contract kind of flamed out for him. Remember, he was going to get paid massive money, and I think Chicago dodged a little bit of a bullet there. I don't think he's a $40 million player. But he's a nice role player here in Pittsburgh for sure. But Cameron Hayward has reemerged. He was a little bit slow out the gate, especially from a pass rush perspective, but he was a huge part of this winning streak, man. Getting back to being that dominant pass rusher. He gets, 7 sacks in the last 5 games and ends up with the most sacks he's had and I want to say at least 4 years. Let's see. Because he ended up with 12 sacks. He hasn't had that since 2017. Falls just short of the 61 pressures he had last year, but basically ended up with an identical year to what he did last year. And he was dominant last year. So Cam Hayward's just an absolute monster. He should not be as strong as he is because he weighs in under 300 pounds, but he's one of the best run-defending defensive tackles in the entire league, which is just a credit to his core strength and pound-for-pound weight room prowess, I suppose. But getting on to this, the next level here with the edge group, Alex Highsmith, up to 15 sacks recorded on PFF, and sometimes there's a difference there with the official stat sheet and what PFF has him at, because sometimes you get like, a holding call ruled out a sack, or a roughing the passer took a sack off the board. PFF counts those, so I don't know if he actually had a legit 15-sack season or not. You guys can certainly let me know in the comments down below, but Highsmith was absolutely a breakout candidate coming into this year. Said he's baby TJ Watt, and gosh, I mean, it's pretty crazy to say like he has the upside of TJ Watt, because I don't think that's true. TJ Watt's just on a different level, but it also feels disrespectful to Alex Highsmith at this point to just call him baby TJ Watt. Like, he is turning into something close to a number one pass rusher. He has the traits coming in, kind of a raw, toolsy dude. But this is what Pittsburgh does. They develop these defensive linemen, linebackers, and in this system, he's just perfect. And he's got a great mentor in TJ Watt, where he can play just like him, contribute as a run defender, where he's been much better this year, show a little bit of power this year, drop into coverage. The fact that they have two of these guys heading into next year, look out, man, because TJ Watt missed most of this season. Alex Highsmith lived up to the call, I suppose, of having to be this team's number one, and he can go back to being their number two next year. He's had a phenomenal season. Then the actual linebackers here, it's interesting what they're doing here. Robert Spillane is the only guy getting full-time starting reps, or season's over, but by the end of the year, he was their starting full-time linebacker, and then they were actually rotating Miles Jack and Devin Bush and getting DeMonte Casey more involved, of course, using Terrell Edmonds in that third safety linebacker role. So they had a little bit of a change of heart with the Miles Jack, Devin Bush linebacker duo. Really didn't work out this year, especially with Miles Jack, who just, I thought, getting removed from Jacksonville into the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, that Miles Jack would return to being honestly one of the top linebackers in the NFL, is where he was several years ago, was paid to be that in Jacksonville, but just not showing the same instincts, certainly not showing the same speed and playmaking ability. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a release here in Pittsburgh. And then Minkah Fitzpatrick sets a career high in interceptions. He's been huge. He's been clutch. I think Minkah finally, in my opinion at least, getting into that conversation for the best safety in the NFL. I have not mentioned him with Derwin and Byard and Bates. I think the way Minkah has played this year, I think he's had his best season and deserves to be in that conversation now. So a great season from Minkah Fitzpatrick. Brief interlude. If you enjoy my analysis, I do want to remind you guys, I have a podcast, the Fully Inflated Football Show. If you want to hear me talk about football more, well, you can either head to the description down below, follow that link for our YouTube channel for the show, or just search Fully Inflated Football wherever you get your audio podcasts. All right, then we have the Buffalo Bills, and why not make Damar Hamlin the star of the month? He was legitimately going to go up before the obvious event that we're just happy he's alive. And gosh, the goosebumps this week, man, started with him waking up, hearing about his charity, and then the 2 kick return touchdowns, the vibes in Buffalo. Just what a turn of events, going from a tragedy to an actual feel-good story here. But besides all that, he's actually playing good football. He went up in our last episodes of Studs and Duds. He's filled in very valiantly for Micah Hyde, who it looks like they might potentially get him back, by the way, which would be crazy for the playoffs. But yeah, Damar's playing really good football, man. He's been very solid in coverage, hasn't been a superstar or anything, but for a depth piece to step in the way he has throughout the season, obviously we're happy he's alive, but that is a loss in the secondary. He was playing at about a low-end starter level this year, so going to give him some love. But then let's turn to the offense that really has just, the ground game has revolutionized the way we can think about this Bills offense. And honestly, the way Devin Singletary is running the football is a big part of that. And we've kind of laughed about the idea of Devin Singletary being a feature back. The Bills themselves have been trying to replace him for years. Zach Moss, James Cook, Nyheim Hines, but Devin Singletary just continues to fend everybody off. This guy's work ethic is incredible. I mean, he's 5'7". He's not a gifted athlete by any regard, but he's quick, he's strong, he accelerates through the hole really well. He's got great vision, and I would actually argue he has one of the best jump cuts in the entire league. Just watch some Devin Singletary highlights. I'm telling you guys, not just his ability to make guys miss with it, but to use it to change lanes and then accelerate into the new lane that he has shifted into. So he has legitimate standout traits, and he's been a big part of this run game, really revolutionizing this offense, and is going to add a physical element to a cold weather Buffalo team that I think is new for this Bills team as opposed to years past in the playoffs. And then this gets really interesting with how well James Cook is running the football. Now, coming out, I loved what he was going to offer out the gate in the receiving game, and he's done some of that for sure. But he's just been better as a runner than I thought he would be, straight up. And I don't say this lightly, it's cliche, but his ability to get from 0 to 60 in a hurry is elite. It's unique. It's different than what most backs can do. It's why the Bills fell in love with him and why they drafted him so high for a running back these days. It's just different, and they're tapping into it incredibly well. They put him out there in, I don't want to say easy running back situations, but they help him out by putting him in those running back looks where there's more space, out of the shotgun, spreading things out, where Josh Allen as a runner is a bigger threat, and when teams are more concerned about the pass with lighter boxes, and you give them a little bit of space. And I guess if you want to break the cliche, if good backs get from 0 to 60 in a hurry, James Cook can get from 0 to 80 at the snap of a finger, just like his brother Dalvin could. So that's unique, and they're tapping into that, and it gives you something that Devin Singletary does not. And I love the way that they have that 1-2 punch, your classic sort of thunder and lightning, if you will. But the vision's been really good in those situations. He's hitting cutbacks. He's seeing blocks develop, which I didn't necessarily see at Georgia. But maybe what's most surprising is the amount of broken tackles he's had. He's got 19 broken tackles on just 87 attempts. That's really good. So this run game, of course, what they do with Josh Allen as well, definitely just providing a new element to the Bills that they can take into the elements in cold weather football that could be the difference for them to be adaptable like that in January football. Excited to see it. But this wide receiver room is getting kind of interesting. I'm not going to say John Brown is taking Gabriel Davis's job. I think he got 7 snaps last week against the Patriots. But I do think it's something to think about. I mean, John Brown has a really nice deep ball connection, shows some chemistry with Josh Allen going back to their time together early in Josh Allen's career. John Brown's 32 years old, but he is, when healthy, he's a good deep threat. And Gabriel Davis, let's face it, has really struggled. He hasn't been a reliable contested catch target. He hasn't been separating. He's been dropping footballs. He just has not been someone that this Bills offense and Josh Allen trusts and wants to turn to right now. So if that trust is there with John Brown and he's healthy, do they put the Gabriel Davis, I don't want to call it a project because he's shown some really good stuff, but do they put Gabriel Davis on the shelf and prioritize a veteran that they can count on a little bit more? It's certainly something that could play out as we head into the playoffs here, but obviously disappointing for Gabriel Davis as he came out really strong in the first couple months of the year. The way he ended the year last year, there were few preseason players in all of football with more hype than Gabriel Davis, and he just is not living up to that hype that was created around him. And it does make me think a little bit about some deep threats that were mid-round picks that kind of faded away. Just a couple guys come to my mind. Darius Slayton, who took a couple years to get back into that, good deep threat conversation. There's the guy for Justin Herbert in his rookie year. What was it, Johnson, I think? He disappeared. Like, sometimes these deep threats can be flashes in a pan. I'm not saying that's what Gabriel Davis is, but he's got to start playing better. There's no way around that. Dawson Knox has really come on, 4 touchdowns in his last 4 games, 1 each. With Gabriel Davis struggling, you're seeing Josh Allen target Dawson Knox in some of those contested situations and some of those red zone looks, and he's been delivering, whereas he was not so much earlier in the year. He had a bit of a slower start. Dawson Knox, a hyped up player in his own right, who got paid this offseason. He's a good player. He's a good athlete, and they're going to need him to continue playing well here into January. Roger Saffold, however, is someone to keep an eye on. I know we're talking a lot about playoff football here, but it's important. Someone to keep an eye on. Is he going to be an issue for this Bills offensive line that I think is the potential biggest weak link for them, along with the secondary and all the injuries they've got back there? But Saffold has been straight up not good this year. And sometimes these veterans can turn it on late in the playoffs, but he's a 34-year-old guard. His pass protection has regressed year after year, and it just has not been good. He hasn't been the same as a run blocker either, so keep an eye on Roger Saffold here for the playoffs. And then for the defense, just some guys in this front 4 that are playing really well. A couple of veterans, man. Daquan Jones and Shaq Lawson. Daquan having his career high as a pass rusher, 30 pressures on the season, 5 sacks, both career highs. He's got some get off. He's 330 pounds with full size, so he's a pocket pusher. They use him on stunts and rely on him to create some pressure. He's been a nice signing as a budget player there. And then Shaq Lawson, I want to talk about him. He's had an increase in playing time with Von Miller going down, and just a fun story. Jermaine Johnson, the first-round pick for the New York Jets, I compared him to Shaq Lawson on smelling salts because I loved the way Jermaine Johnson defended the run, just like Shaq Lawson does. And Lawson over the last couple the last couple years has kind of faded away, Miami and wherever else he was, but kind of looks like that dominant run defending rotational edge player that he's been at his best in his career. So he's still there's not a lot of juice from Shaq Lawson, not a lot of pass rushing ability, but he's a tough dude. He can hold his own and defend the run, which the Bills need because they want to come out in nickel packages, 6-man fronts, and they need these D linemen to be able to hold on their own. And he's a part of that, along with Greg Rousseau, who's been doing that all year. Been getting after the quarterback all year, just continues to show that consistency, which is going to be the thing you want to see from Gregory Rousseau throughout his career, obviously. But big playoffs for him. We'll wrap up talking about the playoffs one more time with the Bills here. You know, they need some edge pressure out here. They're not really getting it from Lawson. They're honestly not getting it from Basham or from AJ Epinesa all that much. Rousseau's going to have to step up and give them everything he has. He's had some huge games this year. He's had some more quiet games. He's still a young player, kind of refining his skill set with that length and the power he has, a little bit matchup dependent in how he wins. But you guys know I'm a big Gregory Rousseau fan, and his climb has just been kind of steady here. He's got an opportunity, I think, to really make a name for himself here in big January football. Next up, we have the Miami Dolphins, who kind of crawl into the playoffs here after a rough stretch. But we are going to start with the star of the month, as Jalen Phillips has absolutely burst onto the scene. And I've talked about this. I don't know if it's because of Bradley Chubb's arrival necessarily. Bradley Chubb has actually been very quiet in the last month. I thought about lowering him. But I did notice that Jalen Phillips has almost exclusively been playing on the left side, which, if I recall from watching him at Miami, that's where he played in college at Miami University. And I don't know if it's just he's more comfortable there or if something's really clicked for him, but either way, he was straight up, I would actually say, the 4th best pass rusher in the NFL, really from about this time, from like weeks almost like 12 on, honestly. He has been truly remarkable. He was definitely the highest upside prospect in that draft, just had some concerns about career longevity, which seems to be in the past. He's got really good athletic juice. He's every bit of 6'5", 260 pounds. He can beat you with a long arm bull rush. He can beat you with different kinds of swim moves and rip moves, and he has a full pass rush tool belt. He has been a dominant rusher and just a godsend for this Dolphins team that obviously was looking for an improved pass rush. They kind of found it in a different way. Not to say Bradley Chubb, whatever. I'm not going to dance around it. I don't think it was a good trade. I think he's overrated, but if Chubb is just an overpaid number 2 and you've got Jalen Phillips basically as an underpaid number 1, you'll live with that. But let's talk about this offense a little bit and Tua. And the reality is Tua just has not had a good last couple of months. Obviously, you hope he can recover from the concussion situation. We'll see if we end up seeing him in the playoffs or not, but and that's a sensitive topic, right? We don't know how much, say, that Packers game impacted his play, but he's really regressed over the last several weeks, months of his play back to that quarterback that we were afraid of him being here in Miami. And he's sitting here at a 76 now, which is way higher than I felt about him coming into the year. I think if he can stay healthy, he can still be that sort of Jimmy Garoppolo level point guard quarterback who's going to make some mistakes and has his physical limitations. But it's just unfortunate that this was the end of his season, seeing him going back to some of those just kind of boneheaded interceptions, not seeing defenders over the middle of the field, some of the missed throws and the physical limitations. So he's going to come down a little bit. I don't think he absolutely sucks at this point, but definitely, a pump the brakes moment from Tua over this time frame. But then Raheem Mostert's going to continue to go up, really thinking about that Buffalo game. Now, he does get banged up again, which durability has been a concern for Raheem Mostert throughout his career. Looks like he's going to miss the playoffs. But for the course of the season, he was able to stay out there for the majority of the year. Looked a little bit bigger to me and just running the ball extremely well. So going to give him a little bit of credit there. Looking like a more complete back this season, I'd say, than just the speedster that he was in San Francisco. Then some of these lower level offensive linemen have actually played pretty well in the last few weeks. Brandon Shell has kind of solidified himself as a starting right tackle again in this league. That's what he's been, just kind of a low-level starter with the Jets, with Seattle, now back here in Miami. There's value in that. He's fine. And then Greg Little has been playing some left tackle recently, and he definitely has had his struggles this season. Do not get me wrong. And some Dolphins fans might see that name and be like, how is he going up? Well, the last 3 games that he's been out there at left tackle when Teron Armstead's been down, he's actually held up the best he ever has in pass protection. I don't think there's a whole lot there, but this is a former 37th overall pick with a lot of physical tools. Could be something's clicking for him. Could just be a nice run of games, but he's going to go up a little bit. But Robert Jones, I actually think there is something there. I compared Robert Jones to Robert Hunt when he came out of Middle Tennessee State. He's an absolute mauler. I will say it's fascinating that they have these, when Greg Little's in there, they have these 4 big mauler types. None of these are remarkable athletes as far as wide zone blocking. And then they have Connor Williams in there at center, who's a total undersized move center. But they have a bunch of power blockers in there at guard and tackle right now. Just a fascinating mishmash of scheme fit, if you will. But, Robert Jones, I think, can be a starting left guard in this league. He's got very similar traits to Robert Hunt. I want to say Robert Jones even played some tackle in college. That's why he reminded me of Robert Hunt, but just really nice raw strength, a people mover up front. And he's been pretty solid in pass protection. So I think they look at him as their left guard as they head into next season, and they have at least their guard situation has solidified, their interior offensive line position has solidified. That was obviously a big question for this Dolphins team coming into the year. Now, defensively, Christian Wilkins is going to go up. He's having his best year. The pass rush ability has just been very consistent over the last few years for him. We know he can do that. But his ability to hold his own, I think he has put some extra time in the weight room, seeing him kind of enter his prime from a run defense perspective. He's really good, getting messy in the trenches, shedding blocks, sometimes taking on double teams. He's had a really impressive season when it comes to his impact on all 3 downs for the Dolphins. Melvin Ingram is going to come down. We've seen his snap count deteriorate ever since they got Bradley Chubb, but his pass rush efficiency has fallen completely off the face of the earth. He was really good in the first half of the year for the Dolphins. He's, 33, 34 years old, so could just be running out of steam. Could be he needs to get into the swing of things as a starter before he can set up pass rush moves and all that stuff, because he is a very refined rusher. But regardless, his play is not meeting up to that 80 grade we have on him. Then the linebackers have played really well the last month. Jerome Baker, I think, having his best year as both a run defender and a coverage player. He sets a career high with pass deflections with 3 this season, grading out well. They're paying him handsomely to be their number 1 linebacker, and he's paying it back to them. And then Landon Roberts is really good for the role that they ask him to play. Obviously a very different player than Jerome Baker, who's more on the lighter side. Roberts plays that classic Belichick system, thumper, and he's just really good at what they ask him to do. He's a good run defender. He's a good blitzer. They don't ask him to cover because he can't cover, but that's fine with how they scheme him up. And then in the secondary, Kader Coho, the undrafted pickup out of Texas A&M Commerce, continues to just be really solid at corner. He's had his ups and downs. He was great against the Jets in the final game of the season after just some kind of inconsistent weeks in there. So he's just been a very pleasant surprise, solidified himself as a starter. He can play inside and out, just a nice versatile piece that they somehow managed to find. I mean, you don't see a whole lot of undrafted corners making it as starters in the league. And I think as a young player, he's obviously had his hiccups, but he's had a lot of great plays as well. He's got I think 8 pass deflections on the year. It's really impressive. So I think they look at him as a long-term starter probably. But Xavier Howard on the flip side is definitely trending down. He's approaching 30 if he's not 30 already. And the tape just doesn't lie with him, man. He is not sticking in man coverage the way he used to. And you're seeing that interception count fall off the face of the earth. So he's giving up way more yardage than he ever has. He's giving up, 11 touchdowns this season, only 1 interception. When the ball is in his area, he's probably the best corner in the NFL as far as ball skills and tracking the ball. But he's not putting himself in those opportunities to make those plays like he always has. And it's because I think he's slowing down. This is a player that is not known for his speed. He ran like a 4.6 coming out. And if he's lost just 10% of a step, a quarter of a step, that can be the difference between being in position to use those instincts and length to disrupt balls and giving up catches. And I think that's what we're seeing. And it's definitely changing the way they've had to play coverage on the back end. But another undrafted pickup here, Verone McKinley. So between him and Kader Coho, that's a nice undrafted class right there. Robert Jones, I think, was also undrafted. So good work by the Dolphins scouting staff here. But I liked Verone McKinley coming out. I definitely had a day 3 draftable grade on him. I thought he was one of the smarter, more instinctive safeties in the class. He just is small and not fast. He's got like 4.7 speed, and it's shown at certain times. He's definitely missing some tackles. He's not always in the best position, whether it's having the size to bring down bigger ball carriers or just being in the right place at the right time, because he is maybe a half a step behind. But he's gotten significant playing time with Brandon Jones out of the lineup. They do like to go with 3 safety packages. He's familiar with his former teammate there, Javon Holland, at safety, so they communicate things well. He's been adequate as a safety. Deserves a shout out for the undrafted safety out of Oregon. Next, we're on to New England, and the star of the month couldn't be any more obvious here, although Kyle Duggar made some big frickin' plays, an honorable mention. But Josh Uche has burst onto the scene in the likes of, say, Jalen Phillips, who we just talked about, as a pass rusher in this AFC East. So good to finally see Josh Uche get an opportunity in this New England defense. He was a day 2 pick with a ton of athleticism and an explosive player at Michigan who I thought always made sense in New England. Finally letting him get loose, letting him get after the quarterback, because he's actually like one in the small sample sizes that they've used him in the past, but now he is that pass rush feature on 3rd downs, on 2nd downs. He's out there now. And God, his efficiency has been electric. So reminiscent of an undersized superstar pass rusher of years past that I'm sure Uche reminds Belichick of. And that is Elvis Dumervil. he's so low to the earth. He's so quick because he is a smaller guy. And he's just able to manipulate that positioning so damn well. He's got bend and different pass rush moves as well. He sets up inside moves with the threat of that edge threat. And gosh, he's been so fun to watch, so fun to see his ascension. And I expect him to only continue to climb next year, as he looks like he's going to be a linchpin of this pass rush that, as you look into next year, with Christian Barmore going up here as well, we'll talk about momentarily. This Patriots pass rush, might be one of the more underrated units in the entire NFL next season. But let's talk about this offense a little bit. Not a whole lot to really say. I feel like we kind of know what these guys are, and they've definitely stagnated in the last couple of months. But it is good to see them actually use Kendrick Bourne. Kendrick Bourne, who we've been lowering throughout the season, just has not been a focal point of that offense at all. But in the last 3 weeks, the Bengals game and in the Bills game, starting to get some more targets and showing that he can still play when utilized. He still has 1 year left on his contract here in New England. If they do happen to let Jacoby Myers go, I would say Kendrick Bourne can absolutely play that slot role if they want him to. He's been playing a little more on the outside here, though, so definitely a versatile piece. Great wide receiver 4 to have. But he can still play, absolutely. Unlike Nelson Aguilar, who has basically been benched here now as they get Bourne back into the mix. They've been playing Tyquan Thornton more lately. Aguilar I expect to be a pretty cheap free agent acquisition. He's just kind of a year-to-year NFL quality receiver that is now a little bit too far removed from his success in, let's see, were they Las Vegas or the Oakland Raiders when he was there? He's a couple years removed from that big season as a deep threat for me to say that he still has that in him at his age. And then Hunter Henry's going to come down as well, just so remarkably average since he left that Chargers organization. He's just not a bad player, but someone that was once viewed as kind of a premium tight end, to be honest. He's just not that. He is a sort of... what's his name in Tennessee now? He's like Austin Hooper at this point. In his prime, he was a better player than that, but right now he's just a big body. He's not even a great blocker and just needs to come down more from that 82 grade. And then first round pick Cole Strange, 4 out of the last 5 weeks was lockdown for him in pass protection. He certainly had his hiccups, and even week 16, those big guys for the Bengals got him a couple times, but far from his worst game on the season. I think he's starting to fall in line as quality guard with a lot of athletic ability, a former first round pick heading into year 2 now. I think you can feel pretty good about Cole Strange there at left guard. Now, we got some more guys to talk about this defense, which has been definitely overshadowed by all of the narrative about the play calling and the offensive mediocrity. But this defense really has been electric, and they've discovered a lot of young talent here that I think is giving Belichick a lot of excitement for coming back next year with this group. And I don't think this Patriots team is as far away as people want to say. If they can just find a play caller, I do see this as a playoff team next year. But Anthony Jennings is like the perfect edge number 3 here. Was a dominant run defender at Alabama, and he's played that role here for the Patriots. He's a big body dude, not afraid to play physical, and he's a perfect complement to Josh Uche, who maybe isn't a dominant run defender like Jennings can be. And then Christian Barmore, him re-entering the lineup here was just completely swept under the rug. Honestly, his rookie season and the fact that he fell into the second round, he's just a really underrated player. He's actually, on a snap-by-snap basis, one of the best pass-rushing defensive tackles in the NFL at this point. He's done nothing but kick ass and take names since he returned to the lineup here. So you've got a young player in him. You've got Josh Uche. You still have Matt Judon in there. And even a guy like Dietrich Wise has had a good year as well. So, again, one of the more underrated pass rushes in the league, if not the most. Daniel Ekwale, not too much to really say there, other than he's continuing to play well as a piece of that rotation. He's got some pass rush snaps. He's been okay as a run defender. He's a random 29-year-old defensive tackle, making a small name for himself in New England. And it's kind of, I'm not going to say come at the cost of Lawrence Guy, but certainly Lawrence Guy just kind of being a whatever player at this point has been an opportunity for Daniel Ekwale. with Lawrence Guy -3 here, this is one of those where you just kind of look back on the season, you're like, yeah, he didn't really play up to his name. We know who Lawrence Guy is. We know who he's been in his prime, but he's 33 years old now. He's showing that age regression year in, year out. A guy that, as I look game by game, even month by month, it's not like he's been terrible, but you look back on his whole season, the defensive stop rate way down, the run defense grades way down, still kind of lackluster production as a pass rusher. He's just a guy at this point. Pun, I suppose, intended. Not a horrible player, but needed to come down for the full scope of his season. And then let's talk about these linebackers, man. Very similar to what we said about the former Patriot, Landon Roberts in New England, where they protect these guys in coverage. They're 250, 255-pound guys. They don't move well in space, but that's why you have Kyle Duggar and Adrian Phillips and Jabril Peppers, who have all had good seasons this season. That's why you have those guys handle the coverage duties, and you let guys like Jelani Tavai and Jawan Bentley just thump, create chaos, blitz, defend the run. Both of these linebackers have been phenomenal. Jawan Bentley has had his best season, especially, but Jelani Tavai, got to shout him out. Former second-round pick for the Detroit Lions. They were looking for their own version of Donta Hightower, and honestly, Bentley is playing almost close to the level that Donta Hightower did back in the day, but just not as big of a name. But Jelani Tavai doing a lot of that similar stuff. And in Tavai's case, a really impressive stat here. He ended up with 40 solo tackles on the season. He fends off a linebacker in Raekwon McMillan, who is a bigger name, probably fends him off of the starting LB2 job. And Jelani Tavai had 40 solo tackles with 0 missed tackles on the season, a PFF tackle rating of 90. And the next closest linebacker that did not miss a tackle this season had just 9 solo tackles. So 4 times that for Jelani Tavai. Very impressive consistency from him. And I expect him to resume as LB2 for this team next year in this system. And then Marcus Jones, the 3rd-round rookie out of Houston, who I said pre-draft that if he was in the body of one of these more gifted corners, he would be the best corner in this class. And he has totally carved out a starting opportunity now with this defense. But what's crazy is he's playing a lot on the outside as well. And you can just see, I mean, when they use him on offense, especially, you can just see how good of an athlete this guy is. But the sneaky thing about Marcus Jones is he's incredibly smart. He has great technique. And it's not just his man coverage ability with that athleticism and his technique, but you see him passing off zones and communicating, all of the different rules that they have on the back end of this defense. So he's a legit piece. And none was more evident than week 15 when you saw him going just stride for stride with Devontae Adams, probably the toughest cover in the NFL. So just really impressed by his all-around game. It's been a smaller sample size, and I don't know kind of what his long-term outlook is. Like, do they really see him as a long-term perimeter corner at 5'8", 175 pounds? I don't know. And it's not like he's been perfect out there, but they definitely have a role. There is something you can do with Marcus Jones on defense. He's not just a kick returner and a special teamer. And then we wrap up with Kyle Duggar, who definitely stood out in these last couple games. A couple of huge interceptions. The Raiders game comes to mind. They don't win that game without him making a break on a bad Derek Carr read. And then the Dolphins game as well, a big interception and a pass breakup on top of that. And I think he is reaching his prime as well. Now, he's only in year 3, but he is 27 years old out of Lenoir-Rhyne. And he's just a super talented, classic Belichick guy. I think we're seeing kind of the passing of the torch from Devin McCourty to Kyle Duggar. They play slightly different roles for sure, but I think they're pretty comfortable kind of letting Duggar be sort of the captain on the back end, just from a leadership and play calling perspective. McCourty's been such a big part of that. I think they're pretty comfortable at this point with Duggar kind of taking the reins there. And yeah, he's a really fun, special player that I could see, another guy that I don't think he has Derwin James upside, but he can certainly get into the sort of top 5 to 10 safety conversation as we head into next year. And he's physically similar to a guy like Derwin James. He's 6'2", 220 pounds, and the guy's a freak athlete. He's got legit 4.4 speed. So big fan of Kyle Duggar and what he's doing, and hopefully he can earn a big contract here entering the final year of his rookie contract next year at 27 years old. And now we wrap up the AFC East with the New York Jets, and the star of the month. Well, let's face it, it's been a rough month plus for the Jets, so not easy to find necessarily a star, but let's give Sauce Gardner one more tribute here as we wrap up the Jets season. I mean, he is continuing the legacy of Darrelle Revis. Every receiver has gotten lost in the sauce. He has finished strong, and I think wrapped up first team All-Pro. I don't know if there is a debate for any other corner in football that was as good as Sauce Gardner this year. If he does not win Defensive Rookie of the Year, that's a damn shame, because Aiden Hutchinson's been really sweet and fun, and yeah, those sack numbers look good on a box score, but Sauce Gardner has been the best corner in all of football this season. Like, forget about it. He's been insane. Again, continuing the legacy of Darrelle Revis. What a find for them to get Sauce Gardner with the 4th pick in the draft. If we redrafted this thing, he would go number 1, and there wouldn't be a whole lot of thinking to be had on that. Now, unfortunately, as we talk about this offense, a lot of guys going down. It's been a tough offense to watch for a while now. And Zach Wilson's obviously a big part of that. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. We have discussed Zach Wilson in depth, and it's just pretty crazy, man. I really liked him as a prospect, and I think it's mental, it's confidence, it's, I think, a speed of the game problem for him coming from BYU. A lot of stuff. Just going to be something to think about. You know, why did we miss on Zach Wilson? It's just, quarterbacks are really tough to evaluate. I really liked him. I thought he read defenses well, played on time well, navigated the pocket well. Once he got to the NFL, those things just went away. And he's been probably the worst quarterback in the NFL that's gotten significant playing time. Some of his help, however, have not played great. You know, Michael Carter, you would think that Breece Hall goes down. He was in a really nice position to kind of get an opportunity to show that he can be a 3-down back, and he definitely did not take that and run with it. It's not that he was terrible, but got outproduced in certain stretches by someone like Zonovan Knight. Just his broken tackle percentage cut almost in half from what it was as a rookie, where he looked pretty promising. And I think they were smart to take Breece Hall, because Michael Carter's a good player, but I just don't think he's a feature back from what we've seen this year. And then Corey Davis going to come down as well. Just, you know, disappointing free agent signing. He hasn't been completely horrible, but certainly hasn't lived up to his pay grade and what he was once in Tennessee. And then on the offensive line, George Fant. So Fant was their day one starting left tackle. They made the decision to move him to left. They were going to move Mekhi Becton to right, and this whole thing fell apart. Not only did Becton get hurt, but George Fant got hurt after 3 weeks. And he didn't play well at left tackle, but we didn't put a whole lot of stock into that with a small sample size. He misses the majority of the season, but he's been back now for the last few weeks, and playing right tackle has not looked great for him. He's had his worst stretch in a while starting at tackle, so he's going to come down. At 30 years old, he's probably not their answer at tackle next season based on how he's played this year. And then Nate Herbig is someone that's climbed throughout this season, and still a very good value signing. Love having him as a backup, but these last couple weeks, his worst stretch in his young career in terms of pass protection, which is supposed to be his strong suit. He was kind of a turnstile these last couple weeks against the Jets and against the Jags and the Lions that aren't exactly, dominant interior groups. But then we flip over back to the defense, and Nathan Shepard. He's an interesting player. He's been around here for a while. Never really popped too much. Was okay as a pass rusher last year. But now in year 2 with Robert Saleh, he has definitely carved out a nice role as that kind of agent of chaos, that pocket pushing, pass rusher on the interior. He's got a really nice first step, and his ability to create pressure has been pretty impressive, given the fact that he's their 3rd or 4th best defensive tackle. And he's 29 years old, but he's kind of breaking out here late in his career, even though it's only year 5 for him. He was old coming out. But Michael Clemens on the edge, man, what a find in the 4th round. He's not a pass rusher at all. Doesn't have a good first step, doesn't have a whole lot of pass rush moves, but he is a menace out there. 270 pounds. Honestly, I would say one of the stronger true edge players that the league has today. He comes into the league a full-grown man at 25 years old. And yeah, he's graded out as one of the best run-defending edge players in the league. The Jets know what they have in him there, and they don't really ask him to rush the passer. They put him out there on early downs, and he holds his gap and plays with that edge discipline, that edge contain, as well as really anyone in the league. So that's an incredibly valuable piece to have, especially when you have all these other pieces that can get after the quarterback. And then Michael Carter continues to have a great season in the slot. I think if he repeats this performance next year, we can start to talk about him with guys like Taron Johnson, Mike Hilton, and some of the premium slot corners in the NFL, because he's had his ups and downs in coverages. He's definitely had splash plays in flashes, but also has been getting beat in coverage. But you love his tenacity and his run defensibility. He's a high IQ, tough slot corner. And as I've said in the past, having a guy like that at your slot corner position allows you to base your defense out of nickel and still defend the run really well. So there's a lot of value in that side of things as well. I'm not trying to dog the guy in coverage either. Like, he's been a very solid coverage slot corner, just a little more consistency, and he can definitely make himself a household name and earn himself a really nice contract here for the Jets, which is nice for a 5th round pick, a 6th round pick. Another interlude. Over half of you that watch my videos are not subscribed to my channel. So I just want to remind you, if you're not subscribed and you enjoy this content, if you've made it this far into the video, you probably don't hate my stuff. So make sure you're subscribed. Just hit that sub button down below. It's free, and it'll make sure you don't miss any of my stuff. So yeah, go subscribe. All right, now we are moving on to our next division, the AFC South, starting with the Indianapolis Colts. And it's been a tough month to watch the Colts, I'll admit. But hey, no fallers in this stretch, just risers. So some good news, I suppose, for the Colts as they go about their coaching search. But I think if you ask Colts fans, like, other than losing out, what is the biggest thing that you want to see from your Colts team in the final month? And I think every Colts fan, or at least the informed ones, would have said, I want to see Bernhard Raimann keep looking like a franchise left tackle. It was probably their biggest need coming into this season. Obviously, they didn't have a first-round pick. They find this guy in the 3rd round who was in the first-round conversation. I thought, anything later than pick 25 is about when I would have considered a guy like Bernhard Raimann. And he falls to the 3rd round and had a really rough start to start the season. He doesn't even win the starting job out the gate. And then when he did get in there, a little bit at guard, a little bit at tackle, it really just looked like he wasn't ready. Small conference guy, has only been playing football for a couple years, but something clicked around week, 10, pretty much as soon as I started criticizing him on this channel. And he's legit been, man, it's honestly not even a huge stretch to say like a top 10 left tackle in the league since week 10. So that's huge for the Colts. It's been in both regards too, run blocking, pass protecting, and at least there's one saving grace there. And this offensive line now can look at this and say, all right, we really just have to figure out this right guard spot in the offseason, which it's a lot easier to take care of one missing starter than two. And then some other guys on the offense. The run game, for what it's worth, has been pretty good for the last month or so. And Zach Moss, the former Buffalo Bill 3rd round pick, who was basically swapped for Nyheim Hines. I don't really understand that trade from the Colts' perspective, to be honest, but Zach Moss looks better than he ever has. He never really looked all that explosive in Buffalo, but man, the last month of football, he's been dominating. He's got like 340 yards rushing in just the last 4 weeks. He's had no game under 4 broken tackles, and he had as many as 8 in week 18 against Houston. So that's 24 broken tackles in a month of football. I mean, that's really impressive stuff. So this is a former 3rd round pick. They clearly liked him in the draft and like him now. And honestly, if he plays like this, you're talking about a dynamic running back duo, and maybe you don't have to feature Jonathan Taylor quite as much. And then Deion Jackson, small sample size, but he continues to look explosive when he gets a chance. That's another day 3 pick that I thought was a high upside running back. So I think he'll be their RB3 next year. And then I mentioned they have a question at right guard, and I still think they do, but Will Fries has played okay there at right guard over the last 2 or 3 games. He's been a little bit better in pass protection. Nothing crazy there. I think they should still replace him, but he's going to get a little bit of love. And then defensively, just a couple young players in the front front 7 rather. Dayo Odeyingbo, who missed most of his rookie season, but second round pick with a lot of physical tools and upside, has actually been pretty good. And on a per snap basis, he's probably outplayed Kwity Paye, to be honest, who I thought about lowering. I know he's been playing through some injuries, so I like Kwity Paye, so I don't want to dog on him too much, but at least Dayo's looking good. They do a good job kind of sliding him inside, and he is kind of that agent of chaos type, where he's a pocket pusher. He relies on his size mismatch and his get off, and it's been effective for him. And then at linebacker, EJ Speed, they've been down to their backups here with Shaq Leonard missing the whole season. And Speed's an interesting player. He's like 6'4", 225 pounds, so kind of a lanky build for a linebacker, which, to be fair, Shaq Leonard has that same kind of lankiness to him. But yeah, Speed gets his first start of the season last week against Houston and balled out. He's actually played okay throughout the season in just kind of rotational appearances, but 41 snaps against the Texans. He gets 6 tackles, 8 if you count assisted tackles, doesn't miss any, 3 defensive stops, 2 pressures as a blitzer. So, he's a 28-year-old player coming off his rookie contract now. He's going to be a free agent, but I kind of like his skill set with that length and his versatility because he is a good rusher, and I'd like to see them bring him back and maybe make him their starting weak side backer if they do go base packages. I'd like to see him get more opportunities in the future, and I think someone else might be smart to give him a chance if the scheme makes sense and the Colts don't want him back. Now, buckle up because we have a massive list of changes for the Jags, who are just on an excellent run right now, and a big part of that is the play of Trevor Lawrence. Now, the last 3 weeks, honestly, were a little bit more of a dip compared to where he was week 14, week 15. He gets the big win against Dallas, played great, maybe the best game of his career the week before that against Tennessee. So we got to continue to see the consistency from Trevor Lawrence because it hasn't all been there, and I can't wait to watch him in the playoffs. But for the most part, he has done everything they could have asked from him in year 2, and any conversation that existed either after last season or even after his kind of mid-season slump this season, any conversation that he's not going to live up to the hype, or even people went as far as saying he's going to be a bust, that is far behind us here as we look forward. But lots of little pieces moving for the offense, although you can't really call Travis Etienne a little piece. The former first-round pick is, for what it's worth, looking like what you would hope a first-round running back could play like. Urban Meyer kind of getting a little bit of a laugh on that one. In the year of the running back. I mean, he's been super explosive. That's the thing, right? It's those big breakaway runs. The big one against the Texans comes to mind, but he finishes with 1,100 yards this year. There's been some fumbles. There's been some questionable vision decisions where he's trying to kick things outside. So he's not a perfect back, but you pair those traits with an offense that's put him in a position to succeed, and you're seeing a great back there in ETN. Now, the backups are playing well too. Snoop Connor, a rookie out of Ole Miss, big-bodied bruiser, definitely gives them a little bit of something that they don't have in these other 2 backs with ETN and Connor. And he's gotten some small opportunities the last couple weeks. They obviously traded away James Robinson, a little bit more girth there. So Snoop Connor is filling that role as the short yardage back. And then JaMycal Hasty, what a pickup he was for the Jags. Love me some JaMycal Hasty. He's a very nice relief pitcher to Travis Etienne. He's got similar kind of juice and long speed, maybe 90% of Travis Etienne. So if Etienne is fatigued or you want to keep him fresh, you can put JaMycal Hasty in there and not miss too much of a beat. He's had some nice plays over this week 14 to week 18 stretch. Then we got Zay Jones here, who's just, he kind of just randomly shows up. I can't say randomly. He's established himself as a starting caliber receiver, was good in Jacksonville last year. He's having a good year here. But he's just very, I suppose, inconsistent is the best way to put it. Just some weeks he's got drops, he's not really making that impact, and then other weeks he's getting 8-9 targets, mossing dudes and getting open. So I love how he's going to fit in next year. He's at this point a budget. I think they signed him for 3 years, $24 million. So for a starting caliber receiver, that's pretty nice financially. They put Calvin Ridley into the mix. You have Christian Kirk and then Evan Ingram at tight end. This group just all really makes sense all of a sudden. Let's talk about Ingram. We can really just gloss over Luke Farrell. He had a big catch week 18 against the Texans. I should say a nice catch. It was only for 11 yards, but nice concentration. And then he's blocking a little bit, getting into the rotation. But Evan Ingram has been a star for this team and definitely could have been considered star of the month. He's definitely become a focal point of the offense here for the Jags. One thing that you love about him is he's cleaned up a lot of those drop issues. He's still not some great contested catch ball winner, but they do such a good job tapping into his speed. And over this stretch, weeks 14 through 18, you're looking at, 300 plus yards receiving and, almost 30 receptions in those 5 weeks. So they understand they have a mismatch problem there. They're really good with their play calling, designing crossing routes, which is really, if you have Evan Ingram as an option as a crosser, you can just exhaust defenses. You always have to account for that. He's always going to be there as a relief option for Trevor Lawrence, especially when these other guys are stepping up. So they've found a really nice way to use him. I would say the scheme is really tapping into his specific skill set because he's not a blocker. He's not a ball winner. He's hardly a tight end. But he is definitely a feature in this offense at this point. And then the offensive line here, both these tackles playing well. Jawan Taylor's just had a very stable season. I feel like he's just very consistently improved his pass protection throughout the years. I love his technique. He's got quick feet. I think he's just a reliable pass protecting right tackle. Not a lot of play strength there. He can get beat against power rushers, and he's not much of a run blocker. But I do love his consistent ability to slow down rushers. And then left tackle Walker Little, he's got a lot on his plate. Cam Robinson goes down, I think, for the year, and now the Jags are in the playoffs. He's going to have to handle Khalil Mack, potentially Joey Bosa as well in the playoffs here. I love Walker Little. I did think he was a first-round caliber prospect that they stole in the second round last year, and he's played well in the last 3 weeks since Robinson went down. So big opportunity for Walker Little. Could be fascinating to see kind of what happens with this tackle situation because they did pay Cam Robinson. They might have 3 good tackles on the roster, which is a good problem to have. Maybe they could flip it for a different position. But Brandon Sheriff, on the other hand, it's not that he's been horrible, but obviously becomes one of the top paid guards in the league after they paid him in free agency, and he's honestly just been a solid starter. I think Washington made the right decision to let him go. He just hasn't been mauling dudes in the run game like we're used to seeing from him back in his heyday. But as a pass protector, he's actually had a couple ugly games in there. So another player, kind of like what we talked about with Lawrence Guy earlier, where you don't necessarily feel like he's having a terrible season, and he's still a decent player. But you look back on his season as a whole here, and he just hasn't lived up to his you know what I'm saying? His resume is there's a word escaping me, but you get the point. Let's move on to the defensive side of the ball now. Devon Hamilton, my God. Well, he's come out of nowhere. We knew out of Ohio, I can't say nowhere. We know who Devon Hamilton is for the most part, a good defensive tackle prospect out of Ohio State. But seriously, did not expect this down the stretch here. I certainly could have seen some growth from him as a run defender. He's a big, strong, disciplined dude. That's not so much a surprise, but he's really come on as a pass rusher. He's going to finish his season with, 27 pressures, 3 sacks, but he's had some dominant wins the last couple weeks, just showing some real nice athleticism to get after the quarterback. So if he's just a adequate pass rusher and can continue to develop as a run defender, this is kind of the career trajectory of someone like a DJ Reader. You can't expect a guy to just step into the league and be a dominant run defender right away, but he's been very good there. And Reader is an adequate pass rusher as well. Now, that's high praise. That he's got a long way to go to get to that level. But I think when you look at his size profile and athletic sort of potential projection, it's not out of the question that he could become that kind of player. And you'd think that would open things up for Fatukasi to have a better year next year as well, who's been a disappointing free agent signing. And Roy Robertson-Harris has played much better lately. I like Roy Robertson-Harris. He's kind of a nice sort of four-tech sort of hybrid end piece that they just kind of use to create chaos. He's a nice piece for their blitz packages and all that stuff for playing base defensive end. But he has held up quite well against the run in recent weeks and deserves a little bit of a boost here. Along with Corey Peters, the ageless Corey Peters at like 34 years old, coming in and doing a little bit of everything for this Jags team, really out of nowhere. I didn't really know he was on the team until the last couple weeks when he popped several times with some big pressures and some big run stops. So if they're getting a kind of fountain of youth from him, all of a sudden this D-line, as they head to the playoffs, could cause some problems for the Chargers. And then Arden Key, another great free agent signing. Trent Baalke definitely taking a couple of his guys from San Francisco over here with JaMychal Hasty and Arden Key. But he can play, man. And Arden Key was once I think it was a 5-star prospect, someone that was once upon a time entertained as a first-round pick, and then just kind of coming out of LSU, didn't feel like he had the work ethic and development track to be that kind of player. And he was super undersized when he came out. I think he was like 235 pounds. Well, he looks every bit of 260 now. He is big. Reminds me a lot of the way they use Samson Ebukam in San Francisco, where they bring him in rotations, and he just kind of creates chaos. He's got a little power. He's got that speed and bend that was there as that 5-star prospect. So he's turned into a really nice player, and honestly a pretty good mentor there for Trayvon Walker, who is going to have a similar like physical, not physical development, but skill side development that Arden Key has shown. Then to the second level, Foyesade Oluokun's been awesome, man. He took a little bit to settle in just from a consistency standpoint. He had a couple ugly games early on this year, 5 missed tackle performance against the Philadelphia Eagles, but he has been so good in the second half of the year, and I wasn't sure if he was going to pay back that big contract to Jacksonville. They make him one of the higher paid linebackers in the league, because, in Atlanta, he was always a good run and chase player. That wasn't so much the question, but didn't always make an impact in coverage either, and you're seeing him play with a little bit more range, a little bit more like zone discipline. He's just been kind of all over the field. He's been really good going up here for the second episode of Studs and Duds in a row. And then talk about a hot streak with Tyson Campbell, who has quietly been a number 1 corner for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So consistent all year, but his game against the Tennessee Titans was about as good as it gets, man. He breaks up 3 passes on 3 targets, doesn't allow a single reception in that game. Really, to me, the highlight on what's been a great year for Tyson Campbell, who, for all intents and purposes, was a first-round pick for the Jags. He was the 33rd overall selection. I kind of infamously said the Packers screwed up and they didn't even take the best corner from Georgia. I was criticized for that, and that is absolutely true. Tyson Campbell is a beast. They have a number 1 corner to kind of craft this secondary around. He's only 22 years old. He's got all the traits. He's 6'1". He's got length. He's got IQ. He's athletic. So just a great find where they got him. And then how about Darius Williams? We're going to keep ringing my own bell here. We just sung my own praises on the Tyson Campbell take, but I said coming into the year with Darius Williams, not so much that they overpaid him, but when I looked at their roster with Campbell on the outside and with, at the time, Shaq Griffin outside, I said, I'm worried that they are going to put him into the slot. They're going to typecast him as a 5'9" corner into a position that he's not good at. He is a perimeter corner, much better playing in space, where oftentimes in zone coverage is able to read the eyes of the QB, use that IQ and the quick juice that he has to make breaks on balls. And for the first 13 weeks of this season, even after Shaq Griffin got hurt, they did that. They played him in the slot and he struggled. And throughout the course of this series, we have been lowering him. But week 14, they put him at outside corner. And in the 5 games since then, He's been targeted 18 times. He's given up just 6 receptions for only 46 yards. He's got 5 pass breakups and hasn't allowed a touchdown. He's been locked down back at outside corner. So keep him there. Don't mess around. That's why he earned that contract, was playing perimeter corner in LA. So don't put him back in the slot, especially when Trey Herndon has actually played his best corner in the slot. He's 5'11", 190, not a super athlete, but he is a physical guy. So between those two moves and Rayshon Jenkins now playing a lot more strong safety in the last really 5 weeks, week 14 through 18, they've made some really nice adjustments. Really impressed by the way Mike Caldwell in his first year with this defense has taken a little bit of time for sure to kind of reshape these guys and find the right scheme fits, but he got there, and this group's really coming together. So I do wonder what they'll end up doing with Shaq Griffin. I don't know if Griffin can play in the slot or if they want to move on from that. Luckily, slot corner's theoretically the easiest position to find, and maybe Trey Herndon keeps playing well there. But yeah, just a lot of positivity surrounding the Jacksonville Jags right now after they stunningly won their division and are going to be in a playoff game against the Chargers. And then the Houston Texans butchering the job, not getting the #1 pick, kind of screwing everything up, but some interesting stuff going on here. So the star of the month is going to be Agbanya Okoronkwo, the free agent acquisition from the LA Rams, who played well in a rotational spot for the Rams last year, but given a lot more opportunities here in Houston, and he's been a very efficient pass rusher. He's an interesting build, 6'2", 250 pounds, plays very low to the earth, but has a lot of different pass rush moves that he can use to beat you. He's played at a starting caliber level, so I don't know. I would assume he was brought in on a 1-year deal, but they should work things out, bring him back, and pair him with Jonathan Grenard and whatever talent they bring in, and you could do a little bit worse. There's few worse edge duos than that in the league, but we know where this team is at. Adding anybody under 30 of starting caliber is going to be important for this team as they try to become a real boy again next year. But let's talk about the offense for a little bit. So Davis Mills, after returning from getting benched, I think, when he was in there in his first starting opportunity, I think he was playing very uptight, didn't want to make a lot of mistakes, and felt like he could lose his job if he did. And actually, he lost his job because he was too conservative. Takes a few weeks on the bench, and then, I don't know, something kind of clicked in for him, just as far as showing off a little bit more athletic tools, the ability to make plays on the move. It was just interesting to see a different version of Davis Mills. He's not going to be the starter next year, and no one should look at him as a future, starter or anything like that. But if nothing else, a really nice backup, a guy that now has, almost 2 full seasons of starts under his belt. He's still young. Weirder things have happened than him kind of figuring things out as time goes on, but I like seeing a different version of him and a little more explosiveness there. Then we got Amari Rodgers, the waiver wire pickup from Green Bay. It's funny, you put him out there at wide receiver, and he can actually make plays. Green Bay just neglected to use him, really. He was fumbling punts and ended up getting cut by Green Bay, but Houston plugs him right in there. He makes a few nice plays. I mean, right away, getting down the field, catching a touchdown. Can't even remember what game that was in, but I liked Rodgers as a prospect. He was a 3rd-round pick, probably at his best as a slot player, but there's a world where he can still become a starting slot receiver in the NFL. The Texans are the #1 waiver priority, and they picked him up right away. So good to see him finally start to play well in the NFL. Tegan Quitoriano, a day 3 rookie out of, I think, Oregon State. When they call his number in the passing game, he's come down with some nice catches, so could be something there. We'll see in the future. And then Jordan Akins, he's 30 years old. He's back for another stint in Houston. They cycle through all these tight ends, and they're right back to where things started, but look, he's playing well. He's having his best year as far as consistency in the receiving game. He's been a go-to target for them. He's a decent athlete with decent size. You could do worse than Jordan Akins out there. Another player that I wouldn't be surprised if they work out a contract extension with him. Feels like they can't get away from him, but he's found his way back and looks like a starting caliber tight end at least. Now, Laramie Tunsil still just quietly been the best offensive lineman in the NFL this year. He's been just locked down completely on the left side of the line there. That speaks for itself. There's not a whole lot else to add. He's going up for the third consecutive Studs and Duds episode in a row, which is not easy to do for someone that's into the 90s with their grade. Then Kenyon Green, on the other hand, next to Laramie Tunsil. This is looking pretty bad right now. He's only 21 years old. He's an athletic guy. He's got plenty of time to figure things out, but he's been quite possibly, a bottom 3 starting guard in the NFL this year. They spent a top 15 pick on him, and you would hope, like some of these other linemen that struggled early, could have, settled down a little bit, and that's not been the case with Kenyon Green. He needs to earn this starting job next year. They need to at least put him in a position, in my opinion, where he should have to go out and earn it, because gifting him this job, he clearly was not ready, and he's really struggled. Then over the defensive side of the ball, Malik Collins, a very underrated player for this Houston team that not a lot of people watch, but he's just a good pass rushing interior guy. He plays the run tough. Just a good starter on the inside, more of a pass rusher than a run defender, but he's one of their more valuable defensive players, believe it or not. Rasheem Green, not a whole lot to add there. He's played 1 million snaps in this league after being a high-round pick for the Seattle Seahawks, and he's playing here. He's defended the run adequately. He's going to get a little bit of love here, but not much else to say there. Tavier Thomas, on the other hand, he's very fascinating to me. He's one of those players last year. Remember, this is the second time in a row that the Houston Texans have been a joke team, team that is just going to try and, throw shit at the wall and see what sticks with a lot of these players. Tavier Thomas out of, I want to say, Ferris State, is an athletic guy at 5'10", has a good, long speed, good testing numbers and all that stuff. Played really well for this Texans team last season in the slot. For whatever reason, they didn't go that way this year when the season started. But he's back in there now and playing great again. So he's quietly been kind of an unsung hero for this secondary. Another guy, between him and Okoronkwo and Jordan Akins, these are the kind of guys that I do think the Texans should bring back because they're playing at good starting caliber levels, So we'll see what they do with those guys, and maybe some of them are even under contract next year. I'm not sure. But then Tremon Smith, he's played a bunch this month as well. Similar like what I just said. This is what they should be doing at this point in their season, picking up random players with athletic tools, just seeing who can stick. And Tremon Smith, 3 straight starts, solid at corner. This is a guy that's bounced around the league. He's been tried out at running back. The league clearly values his athleticism. He was like a 6th-round pick for Kansas City in 2018. He's been a good kick returner. So, maybe he's figuring things out. Not everybody develops at the same rate. So another player I'd like to see them keep around as maybe a 5th cornerback to compete for a roster spot. For what it's worth, he's played well these last few weeks. And then Jalen Petrie, he made the notes section in the November edition of this series because he had some up and down weeks, but he's definitely starting to figure some things out. The rookie safety out of Baylor, he's just really made a lot of plays. He's definitely had streakiness all over the place. He's had some bad coverage plays. He's had plenty of missed tackles, and it hasn't been a hit the ground running season for Jalen Petrie. But you like the way he finished the year, and you feel good about his future prospects here for the Texans. All right, then our final team in the AFC South, the Tennessee Titans, a tough team to sort through with all these injuries, man, but goodness, Chigoziem Okonkwo, the rookie tight end out of Maryland. Boy, did they find a diamond in the rough, and man, this just makes sense. The team that let Delaney Walker at 6'2" shine, the team that got Jonnu Smith to be one of the highest paid tight ends in the league. Plug in Chigo Okonkwo and let him flourish, dude. He's an incredibly athletic tight end, legit 4.5 speed, and he was one of my favorites coming out of Maryland. I hate to say I told you so coming out of the draft. I definitely would have taken him before he got selected, but you could see, man, he had a little attention to detail in his routes. He enjoyed the blocking aspect. Not that he's thrived as a blocker at the NFL, but he's been far from miserable. He had solid hands when they did throw him the ball. He just needed an opportunity to be used and to tap into his athleticism. He's making big catches down the field, the run after catch. They have found a starting tight end, at least, in Chigo Okonkwo, and I'm just excited to see him become a feature here. You know, there's a lot of pessimism with Tennessee right now, but you look at him and Treylon Burks into the future, and those are a couple of really nice young weapons. And Josh Dobbs won't be the quarterback throwing them the football, but hey, he stepped in and played valiantly. Ended up, you know, they kind of went to him over Malik Willis, and I think that was the right call. You know, he played all right. He kept them in that game against the Jags, avoided mistakes to a decent enough degree, and used his legs and, you know, maybe earned himself some money to stick around as a backup in the NFL because he's been bouncing all over the place. And then on the offensive line, Corey Levin, another UT Chattanooga guard / center here. Cole Strange, of course, for the Patriots, who we talked about earlier, another one. But he was a 6th-round pick in 2018, I believe. So he was drafted, but I had never really heard of Corey Levin until recently. But with that offensive line shuffling around with Dennis Daly and all these random players, Levin was one of the guys that actually stepped up and played pretty well. They do have needs at interior offensive lines, so I would expect them to maybe entertain him as a competitor for the job next year because he has played at a very acceptable level, even though it's a small sample size there. Some of these linemen just take a long time to get there. And then over to the defensive side of the ball, just kind of a motley crew of players, honestly. Kevin Strong, a 26-year-old defensive tackle, has just had a very serviceable season for the Titans here. He's been around the league, a couple different stops. He's found some success here. DeMarcus Walker has been a great pickup for them. You know, Walker I take a little bit more seriously. He actually had a pretty good year for the Houston Texans last year. This is back-to-back 30-plus pressure seasons, and he's just kind of a good game-wrecking, rotational defensive end. This is the kind of player that I think will have a role in the league with these 3-4 defenses for a while now. I mean, he's established himself. He's only 27 years old. He's a former, I think, maybe even 2nd-round pick for the Denver Broncos. So he's a piece. And then Monty Rice is very fascinating to me. We talked a little bit about him in the last episode of Studs and Duds, but I was a huge Monty Rice fan coming out. I thought the Titans found themselves a steal in him. And this is beyond something that's just cute and fun. Like, I think Monty Rice has the tools to be a starter in the NFL. Never fully worked out for him at Georgia. He rotated. We know how many talented linebackers were on that team. 3 of them got drafted last year. Rice came out the year before that. But, you know, Rice has very good coverage instincts. He's shown to be a very good tackler here in the NFL. He's now gotten starting opportunities and looked good. I say this could get beyond cute here, and he could actually be a starter for them next year. Again, I think he has all the tools to be that, and I certainly would be tooting my own horn because I thought he was a total steal in the draft. But, you know, they have to make a contract decision on David Long, who's been a good player. I know Titans fans don't want to see him go, but they've shown to be pretty plug and play with this linebacker position. They certainly didn't regret letting Jayon Brown go. And I wouldn't be stunned if they turn the keys over to Monty Rice over David Long. They also, even if they want to keep David Long, Zach Cunningham, his cap hit skyrockets next year, and they can get out of it with pretty minimal dead cap. So he seems like a pretty good cut candidate, even though I like Zach Cunningham. If they are confident in what they've seen from Monty Rice here, maybe it's Rice and Long next year. So keep an eye out on Monty Rice for sure. You heard it here first. And then in the secondary, just a couple of guys that I think have earned an opportunity to be back here as backups. Trey Avery has gotten opportunities. He's looked like an undrafted corner at times, but has filled in valiantly given where he's perceived. Rookie out of Maryland. Has had some good games. And then Joshua Kalu has really been a starter for them over the last month because of all these injuries. He's played some slot corners, strong safety, you name it. And he's just a physical dude out of Nebraska. Horrible athlete, not a great coverage player, but gives it his all. Really good run defender and tackler. So he'll stick around for sure as a special teamer. He's a Mike Vrabel kind of guy. Third and final interlude, I just want to remind you guys that the official store of That Franchise Guy is open for business. You can shop TFG merch. You can rep the brand. You can support the brand. We've got the Kyler Murray Size Matters Not brand up there right now, and lots more coming. So head over to thatfranchisestore.com and check it out. Heading west now to the AFC West. We're going to start with the Denver Broncos. The star of the month, Patrick Surtain, finishing strong after, I don't want to say some midseason hiccups, but it's been an incredible season for him. And that November month was, I guess, his most down part of the year. But wrapping things up, we said Sauce has been the best corner in football, but you can certainly make a case for Patrick Surtain as well. And teams have just stopped targeting him like altogether. And this run here included 2 games against the Chiefs where he was targeted a total of, 3. The Chiefs in the first matchup, week 14, they targeted him 3 times. He gives up a 12-yard reception and gets a pick on Patrick Mahomes. And then they meet again in week 17, and then they just say, fuck it, we're not going to throw at him at all. 0 targets for Patrick Surtain in that game on 60 snaps. Like, he's just been insane, let alone the Arizona game where he was locked down with a pick in that game as well. He's been freaking awesome, man. So we're going to talk about this offense a little bit, but they're starting to play a little bit better on that side of the ball. You have someone at 23 years old who's certainly in the conversation for being the best corner in the NFL. Like, there is a turnaround. There's a world where this can turn around for the Broncos, and Pat Surtain can be a focal point of that. But let's talk about some of these guys on the offensive side of the ball. Marlon Mack, I want to spend a little time on him. Like, I feel like he got gypped a little bit. The Colts draft Jonathan Taylor when Marlon Mack was poised to become kind of a full-time starter and I guess a feature back of sorts. And he obviously gets buried behind Jonathan Taylor for good reason. But they just didn't use him at all. And then the Houston Texans signed him this year, and I thought he was going to be a competitor for starting opportunity, and they cut him, right? And then he's just kind of hanging out there, and the Broncos pick him up, and he looks really freaking good. I think he's running kind of pissed off. Now he gets hurt or benched or something. I don't know. His snap count stopped after like week 16, but week 14 against the Chiefs, he has that big touchdown reception. The next week, much better on the ground. So, like, I think Marlon Mack can still play. I'd bring him back as a backup to, what's his name? The running back that'll be back here, Javonte Williams. And you could have a nice little backup there with Marlon Mack. And then Jerry Jeudy, this is huge, man. Him finally starting to look like the receiver myself and many thought he could be coming out. He's been a deep threat. He's been just developing a much better chemistry with Russell Wilson, and maybe he is just a quarterback that takes a little bit of time to figure out what he likes in those improv situations. So, I'm kind of buying back into the Broncos a little bit. I think there's maybe some overreactions going on with this team, and it's not all bad. Now, Billy Turner has been brought back into the mix after missing most of the year with an injury, and it just has not looked good. I don't know. He's fine. He's now rated as a 70. He's a swing tackle, probably at 30 years old, entering the backup stages of his career. But next to him, Quinn Miners. Love this dude. Never should have been a 3rd-round pick. I had a 1st to a 2nd-round grade on him, and I'm glad I did. This dude is going to be, at some point in his career, is going to be a Pro Bowl guard. I just know it. He's been blocking his ass off in the run game. He's gotten better as a pass protector as the year's gone on. I'm just such a fan of Quinn Miners. Good to see him playing well, going up for the 2nd episode in a row here. Then we got a couple of rotational defensive tackles here. Jonathan Harris, I don't think any relation to Shelby Harris, but plays kind of a similar role. Well, at a much smaller level. That was disrespectful to Shelby Harris, but same position, obviously, kind of a run defender. And then Mike Purcell at 32, 33 years old just keeps eating blocks, getting nasty up front, extending his career. It's admirable. He's had a nice career for what he is. And then linebacker Alex Singleton, continuing to impress. Philly lets him go after a good year last year, and he plays like every snap is his last, and he knows any snap could be his last, considering he's probably one of the worst athletes in the NFL starting at the linebacker position. But he breaks down runs as good as anybody. He's been a secure tackler. They will shelter him in coverage in this system, but he hasn't been getting abused in coverage, at least. So I like what I'm seeing from Alex Singleton. And then another ring the bell moment here for TFG. Damari Mathis was a bit of a sleeper, someone not a lot of people had heard of when I made him my 10th ranked corner in this draft class. Huge fan of his game, just such a physical corner. And he's had to play a lot here with Darby hurt. They go ahead and release Michael Ojemudia here because of the way Damari Mathis is playing. And he's had his ups and downs as any third-round corner would have, but he has all the tools to be a starter in this league, especially when he gets to be the number 2 guy opposite of Patrick Surtain, who can follow the team's number 1 guy around. It's a great situation. Damari Mathis, definitely a breakout candidate for next season. And then we just have one note on Tyler Beatty. They pick him up from the Ravens practice squad. I loved Beatty, man. I had him slotted as just a touch behind James Cook as a scat back. Love his game. Reminds me a little bit of like a Tariq Cohen type of back. And you put him in the mix there with Javonte Williams, Marlon Mack, Tyler Beatty in Week 18 here as a nice big reception. I think it went for a touchdown. That'd be my 3 right there. You don't have to mess around. You got some talent there. And it's a running back room that they have really struggled with this year when Javonte went down. And definitely a room that could see a fast turnaround with those guys in the room. And then we've got the Chargers, a team I'm really looking forward to talking about here for a variety of reasons. Number one of which reasons is Justin Herbert's getting his overall points back. We've taken 2 away at different, one each at different episodes throughout the season. Just the same explosiveness that we've seen from Herbert hasn't been there. But turns out he gets Mike Williams and Keenan Allen back. And, there's Justin Herbert again. I think it's been a tough season for him with these receiver injuries. And the offensive scheme is just so vanilla and plain. But maybe he hasn't shattered any expectations or reached any new peaks that we may have hoped Herbert would reach this year. But I'm at least comfortable saying I'm right back to viewing him as that top 5 great quarterback. Not that I had worries about him, but not even any negative things to say. He's been excellent, man. He's been decisive in the quick game, accurate, deep. He's pushed the ball better and made plays in the clutch in the last 5 weeks of football. So love where we're at with Justin Herbert. So excited we get to see him enter the playoffs here with a team that, honestly, as we transition to talk about the rest of the team, is getting kind of healthy under the radar here, entering the playoffs. Josh Kelly's going to go up, whatever. He's been fine. I don't have any strong opinions on Josh Kelly. He's been running the ball well. They still could use a better true runner of the football, in my opinion. But Mike Williams returning has been a big part of that, and he does hurt his back in that Week 18 game. I will say that. It's kind of meaningless there, but you can just feel it. He's a little bit different this year. His ability to go up and make these ridiculous catches and just the way Herbert plays better and more comfortable when Mike Williams is out there. I'm not going to say as a safety blanket, because when they're targeting Mike Williams, it's 15, 20 yards down the field, but there is an it factor about him with Justin Herbert that's just a little bit different. And I've just been blown away with Mike Williams, not just the highlight catches, but he's not dropping the ball as much as he has in years past. It's been a slight knock on him in years past for a guy that's supposed to be such a reliable, big-bodied receiver. He has racked up some drops. Well, not this season. He had 1 drop on the year. It came in Week 1 against the Raiders compared to 7 drops last season. He also had a 6-drop season in 2019. So just love the way Mike Williams is playing. He's going to go up to 83 to an 85, get much closer to that kind of wide receiver 1 true X territory in my mind, as opposed to the way I've discussed him in the past as being someone that kind of needs to be your wide receiver 2 because of that lack of separation ability. Well, if he's not dropping the football and he's coming down with the catches he's done this year, he's much more like a Mike Evans, right? So That's Mike Williams. And then another kind of sneaky player here is Donald Parham, who hasn't played much this year. He's just a guy that has kind of struggled to stay on the field since they signed him from the XFL. But the last 4 weeks, he's been out there and gets very minor playing time because Everett is tight end 1 here. But Herbert likes throwing him the ball when he's out there. He's that big 6'8" target with speed that can separate. He's also been blocking better than he has in years past. Parham could come in and be a secret weapon for the Chargers here in the playoffs. Definitely a name to keep an eye on. I won't be surprised if he kind of has a breakout playoff run here and then heads into next year as this team's number 1 tight end potentially, and a lot of fantasy hype, so to speak. And then on the offensive line, these guys are playing really good football, which is really a big deal for this team. We've talked at Labrum about Jamari Sawyer kind of being that breakout rookie, and he continues to just be a rock at left tackle. He has, the occasional loss. He's a 6'3" guy. He's a 6th round pick. He's not the most incredible athlete, but he has been very steady. If he loses, he gets right back up, and enough that Herbert can trust what he's getting from that blindside protection. And then Trey Pipkins at right tackle, he was a pivot player for this team's entire season. They were really banking on him being a good right tackle, and for the majority of the season, he has not. But the last 4 weeks has been the best run of football he's been on. So another player to really keep an eye on if this team's going to get serious about making a playoff run, and if they're going to hang against teams like the Bengals and the Chiefs and the Bills, it's got to be guys like Trey Pipkins kind of starting to reach their potential. And then we get to the defensive side of the ball. I really like how these guys have stepped up, and I really like how Brandon Staley has made a lot of defensive adjustments. I will say a big part of them starting to play better football is these two guys right here, Morgan Fox and Kyle Van Noy, both just turning it on here at the end of the season. Morgan Fox, veteran role player, was a under-the-radar signing, but they've gotten a lot of pass rush production out of him. He's up to a 40 pressure, 7-sack season. That's the best on his career. That's a legitimate starting caliber pass rusher right there. And then Kyle Van Noy is on a freaking tear, man. He has been pretty quiet, and with Bosa out, they just, haven't really gotten much from him as a pass rusher. They've kind of not found the best ways to use him, but he's back to being prime Kyle Van Noy these last 4 weeks. He's been dominating against the run. They like to play in light packages, so if they can get him in a nickel defense to shed and stack and play with that discipline, that helps the Chargers get into more 3rd and long situations where you can bring in a guy like Morgan Fox. And then on top of that, in those situations, Kyle Van Noy has been a really good pass rusher. He's had 5 straight games with a sack, with 16 pressures in this 5-game stretch. So this defense is really starting to come together in the way that we hyped them up coming into the year. You've got Bosa re-entering the lineup. He looks great. So I'm very fascinated to see if this is all coming together just at the right time. And the only real missing pieces here are, big names, J.C. Jackson and obviously Rashawn Slater at left tackle, but Sawyer's playing just fine at left tackle. And then let's advance to Michael Davis here, who's getting a +4. He's definitely a star of the month candidate. He's playing the best football of his career, and he looks somewhat like a peak J.C. Jackson. He's been a very lockdown corner in the last 2 months of football, and they're using him in press coverage much more than you would have expected. That's some of the big schematic changes that Brandon Staley's making, and it's letting Michael Davis thrive. I mean, he's a 6'2" corner with speed. He's 28 years old. He's played a lot of football, but things are really clicking in for Michael Davis, and he had an excellent game against the Dolphins, against Tyreek Hill in that group, but that was following up games against the Cardinals and the Raiders where he had a pair of pass breakups in both of those games. I mean, he's towards the top in the league now with 12 pass breakups, and has just straight up been one of the best corners in football in this time frame that we're looking at. So if he's playing like J.C. Jackson, all of a sudden you're looking at this Chargers team and it's like, wow, they're kind of getting hot and healthy right now. So just reevaluating this team, I've definitely talked myself into betting on the Chargers this weekend against the Jags, and I'm definitely glad I picked them. And hopefully they don't let me down like the Chargers always do. But we still got to talk about Kenneth Murray. Even he's playing well. Like, he's been incredibly streaky, and you've seen moments where he's just still just so out of position and missing tackles and all that. But he's on a run of like making a bunch of plays in coverage. I think he's up to 4 or 5 pass breakups on the season. You're seeing those impact plays and the speed and range that he has out there. And he's an excellent blitzer. That's another thing that Brandon Staley's been doing so well, is dialing these linebackers back as blitzers. And Kenneth Murray, I think that's helping his confidence. He's getting pressure on the quarterback, getting sacks, and he's just playing all around faster. And then even their 6th-round corner, Jasir Taylor, he stepped in some rotations and I guess injury replacement. He got a start in week 18. I suppose they were probably resting either Samuel or it must have been Samuel, right? Or maybe they were resting the slot corner. But either way, he gets a start in week 18. He does all right. I had a nice pass breakup week 17 against the Rams as well. So, I mean, man, if they found something in the 6th round in Jasir Taylor and what's been a loaded cornerback class, that's just adding insult to injury for a lot of kind of different acquisitions that they've hit on really this year. So definitely trending up for the Chargers. Feel so much more optimistic. Like if they go on a playoff run, that's great, but I just feel so much more optimistic about who this team can be into the future now. And just imagine if they get an offensive coordinator that we like. Next up, we have the 1 seed in the AFC, the Kansas City Chiefs, and our star of the month for Kansas City is going to be Nick Bolton. He has quickly emerged as, one of the smartest linebackers in the NFL. I almost said possibly the smartest. Some really good linebackers, guys like Fred Warner, Roquan Smith, but Nick Bolton is so ridiculously instinctive. This guy has almost 200 tackles on the season. Just let that sink in. And he's a little shorter. He's not the fastest guy, but he always seems to be right there in coverage, and he's never terribly out of position. He is just a very complete linebacker. I was blown away kind of prepping for the Chiefs season, getting ready for their deep dive. I was blown away with how much he stood out as a rookie linebacker. And it's been all the same and some here in year 2. What a find in round 2. I mean, they got Bolton and Creed Humphrey in the 2nd round of that draft. Holy shit. Let's get into this. A lot of guys going up for the Chiefs who have quietly kind of answered a lot of their issues in the last month or so. But Isaiah Pacheco is going to go up. You know, he's just like the perfect back for the Chiefs because teams are going to play too high against them. They have these incredible run blocking maulers in between the tackles, and they're going to face light boxes. So why not take a freaky athlete that plays with his hair on fire that you can just load up in a slingshot and shoot him through a gap and get explosive runs? And that's what Isaiah Pacheco is. I don't like his vision. He's fumbled 3 times. If he was in any other situation, I'm really not convinced, outside of maybe Buffalo, I'm really just not convinced that he would be doing this. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But when we saw him at Rutgers, where he wasn't getting this run blocking, he was really quite bad. So it's, a little give and take there, but God, he is perfect here, and he's really explosive and tough to defend. And then they're doing it again with Jerick McKinnon, where they're saving him towards the end of the season and then using him as their feature 3rd down back. And he's been making plays ever since he came back. It feels like he's getting a touchdown or 2 every week. And, teams are going to defend this Chiefs team playing too high quarters coverages. So to have a guy like Jerick McKinnon who can take those underneath passes, make a man or 2 miss, and then create big plays out of it, it's just another incredible weapon. And on that topic, Kadarius Toney has been a really nice acquisition here. He hardly plays, and when they throw him the ball, it's almost exclusively on jet sweeps, bubble screens, swing passes, all that stuff. He hasn't really gotten a chance to develop as a receiver here quite yet, but he's doing all the stuff. He's rated as a 75 for me. He's doing all that stuff with his crazy movement ability that he's capable of. And I wanted to shout him out because he is playing well, but he's not doing anything that I don't have him rated able to do, if that makes sense, right? And then onto the offensive line, Orlando Brown, he's definitely someone I've called overrated. I was not exactly in agreement that he was a Pro Bowl player and all that. And we'll see what the Chiefs end up doing with him contractually, but he's actually playing some of his best football right now towards the second half of this season. The first half was not necessarily pretty. He was a very average, adequate tackle, but man, he has really been dominating in pass protection in this stretch, weeks 14 through 18. So shout out to Orlando Brown. He's playing really well, and someone's going to pay him. He's really just playing the market and wants to get that bag. With what we're seeing here, someone's going to pay him. I don't know if it's Kansas City or someone else, but good for you, Orlando Brown Jr. And then the right tackle, Andrew Wiley, I don't trust him. He had a horrible Week 18 game against Max Crosby. At some point, I'm afraid that might hurt the Chiefs here. I'm a little surprised that they're still rolling with him. But he's been adequate. Has he been the worst full-time starter at right tackle? He's played over 1,000 snaps this year. There's been games where you don't necessarily notice him, though. So, just based on the fact that he's played all year, he's not grading out horribly necessarily. He's going to go up a little bit, but that's the one player I really look at and say, is he going to be a reason that this team loses in the playoffs? I really hope not. These interior guys continue to kick ass. Joe Thuney, one of the most just locked down offensive linemen in pass protection in the entire league. So he's going up into the 90s now for him. And then Creed Humphrey, also going to just continue to climb. It's just been a steady climb since the second he came into the league. And it's his run blocking. The middle of that line of scrimmage just vacates around him. He's got a gravitational pull effect, and then he drags guys into the mud. He's been pretty solid in pass protection, too. So Creed definitely in conversation for the best center in the NFL. And, the fact that the Packers took Josh Myers over this guy, it's not quite, taking Andy Isabella over DK Metcalf in the second round, but definitely think of that because Creed was the obvious pick. Oh, but anyway, let's move on to the defense. Chris Jones has seriously had a defensive player of the year level season. Now, Nick Bosa and Micah Parsons are going ape shit. It's going to be one of those two guys, but Chris Jones now has solidified himself as the best defensive tackle in the NFL. Aaron Donald, even when he was playing, wasn't on pace to have the season that Chris Jones has had. And I do wonder, was he able to put those 10 pounds back on that they asked him to lose before they had him play edge last year? It's not that he was bad last year, but it took him a while to kind of get back to speed. Now he's back to playing at his comfortable weight at 310 pounds, and he's unblockable. And the timing when he shows up, it seems like every week when they need a big play, it's him showing up, getting a sack, forcing a fumble. So as they enter the playoffs here, he's going to be the guy for a defense that has some holes that can make those big plays and hopefully allow the Chiefs to complete their run to the Super Bowl here. Other than him on the interior, no one's really standing out. Colin Sanders technically having his best year. He's got 20 defensive stops. He's been fine, but not really anybody else on the interior to speak of from a pass rush perspective, especially. On the edge, though, these guys are playing relatively well. George Karlaftis has definitely woken up. He's got himself a nice, almost 50 pressure, 7 sack season. Definitely started slow and isn't dominating in the way that you may have, an optimistic projection may have said he will, at least as far as his win rate and all that stuff. But he's playing really well as we head into January here for a rookie. You'll definitely take 50 sacks and 7 pressures, or that'd be something. Flip that. But yeah, speed of the game seems to be coming along for George Karlaftis. Probably their best pass rusher right now, opposite of Chris Jones, because they're still not getting, a great season from Frank Clark. Now, Mike Dana is actually playing really well. And when he started to get playing time last year, it was really standing out as kind of an early down run defender. But he's kind of getting after the quarterback a little bit here. He's up to a 5-sack season. He's getting after the quarterback at a better rate than his Michigan counterpart in Frank Clark. So I don't think he's a star player, but they rotate him in, and he gets the job done on any down at this point. So he's a nice little player. And then I also got to shout out Leo Chenal. You guys know he was one of my draft crushes. I've got him rated as a 70, and he's been rotating at linebacker, but he's doing everything that I preached that he could do. Coming in and just being a nasty run defender right away as he kind of develops and learns the position a little bit. And I still think he's going to be a player someday. I'd love to see him take that number 2 linebacker position from Willie Gay full-time next year. And Willie Gay's been up and down. He's made actually a couple of big plays in coverage. Thought about bumping him up here. He's just very inconsistent as a player, but definitely encouraging to see what Leo Chanel is doing. This team is just so freaking good at drafting. It's unfair. We got to move on to the secondary now. So Trent McDuffie he's just been a freaking rock, man, since he came back from the injury, their first-round pick. I love everything I've seen from him. And he's not having like these crazy big performances. He's not showing up in the stat sheet with a bunch of interceptions, and he'll give up a catch or two every game, but they're usually short completions, stuff underneath that he's willing to allow. He hasn't really had a bad game yet. That's what's really impressive about Trent McDuffie. So between him and L'Jarius Sneed, who's actually kind of had a bad month, to be honest, but I didn't want to lower him. I love Sneed too much and think too highly of him. And it's just such a high variance position, but do keep an eye on that, I suppose, as a side note. But between McDuffie and Sneed, you got a nice pair of corners. And then these other two guys, Josh Williams and Jalen Watson, the 2 day 3 picks, the lengthy kind of prospect types that have been forced to get a lot of playing time here in Kansas City. They're both kind of, playing well for rookie corners. They've both been a little grabby. They've been beaten at times, as you would expect. But they've also had flash games and splash plays. It's kind of an interesting duo of, backup corners, I guess. One of these guys is going to have to start in the playoffs. I don't know which one they really prefer right now. Watson's probably playing better right now after the last couple games. But, yeah, they're fascinating players for sure. And then you got Juan Thornhill is playing much, much better in the last month, and that's huge for them. Brian Cook hasn't really been much for them, the second-round safety, and they obviously need some help on the back end there. And Juan Thornhill, last year of his contract, and playing some of his best football. He's got a couple interceptions now in the last 3 weeks. He's been tackling much better, so I really like what we're seeing from Juan Thornhill. Maybe he can earn a little contract extension from Kansas City with a nice playoff run here. And then also just a little note here on Justin Reed. I love Justin Reed. I've got him rated pretty well, but he has not had the best season in Kansas City. But as everything's kind of come together here for this Chiefs team, he's starting to play better. And honestly, they're playing Juan a little bit more as the free and Reed a little bit more as the strong. And they seem to be a little bit more comfortable with that. It's not like crazy different with their splits, but it is somewhat noticeable. This scheme's going to move these guys up and down regardless. But I don't know, it's probably a 10, 15% difference as of probably like week 11 or 12. They kind of started to flip that a little bit. So I don't know. They've made some nice adjustments and kind of has this defense in pretty good shape. And the Chiefs are going to be dangerous come January here, man. And then finally, the Las Vegas Raiders. Derek Carr going to drop down 1. Those last 2 games really ugly. A big reason why he got benched. 4 interceptions. Granted, not all his fault, but just man, the lack of it factor from Derek Carr. The Raiders just sick of it. They go to Jarrett Stidham, who's kind of like all it factor. Very different quarterbacks, different styles, but did kind of bring a little energy and a spark to the team. So Carr's going to go down. They're going to trade him. We'll see what he looks like next season on a new team. You put him on a spot with a good O-line and good receivers and a good spread offense. Derek Carr can play like a top 10 quarterback and be a quarterback you can win a Super Bowl with, but this team just not in that position. Jarrett Stidham, on the other hand, he's going to go up 6 for a really impressive start against the Niners, a very aggressive start. He did put the ball in harm's way a couple times, but he had to with the way his defense was playing, and that Niners defense obviously going to make things tough on him. So he'll be the backup next year, I think. There's obviously a connection there between McDaniels and Stidham, but they're going to do something else, whether it's Tom Brady or who knows what it could be. But he made himself some money as a backup. You put up a performance like that, and people are going to treat you as an NFL caliber quarterback for what that's worth. And then Foster Moreau, just been a pretty solid season. He's a pending free agent. I do think he's a guy that tight end needy offenses could plug him in, a good athlete that I think is still kind of coming along as far as how much he's learning the position. He did have an opportunity to be this team's tight end one, and he had his inconsistencies, but kind of finishing strong down the stretch, and I'll be curious to see what happens with him into the offseason. And then Colton Miller, just a rock star, man. The last couple years have been so impressive from him. Needed to wrap up this season with a little bit of love for him. Definitely a Pro Bowl snub. Orlando Brown. Colton Miller should have gotten Orlando Brown's spot. There's no way around it. I mean, we were talking up Orlando Brown, and he finished strong, but Colton Miller's been a better tackle all year. And then the right tackle, this is a massive pleasant surprise for the Raiders, is Jermaine Illuminor, who, Illuminor has had some good moments for those Patriots teams under McDaniels, obviously. Never really cemented himself as a full-time starter, but I think a guy that can play guard or tackle here. He's 345 pounds. He's a freaking brick house, but he's been locked down at right tackle, man. And I think they should really look at him as their right tackle next year. He's only 28 years old. Basically, going back to 2019, whenever he's played pretty well, like a starting caliber player. So I think he's a good play. Like, I think he's someone you can count on as a huge find for them, just sitting there in free agency. Then we go over to the defensive side of the ball, and Andrew Billings is having a really nice year. They desperately needed someone in the middle of this defense to step up from a run defense perspective after they let Jonathan Hankins go. And Andrew Billings, another one of those guys that was just sitting there where he hasn't gotten a ton of opportunities in recent years, but when he's played, he's been a pretty good run defender. He's a big, strong guy up in the middle, playing for some money here. Someone that I would imagine was brought in on a one-year deal, and I think they should bring him back. Also on that D-line, Clelin Ferrell actually finished kind of strong, former number 4 overall pick. I don't think he's been an absolutely waste of space when he's played since he came into the league. It's just obviously disappointing that they spent such a high draft pick on him. But some nice pass rush reps in there down the stretch here, and just something to keep an eye on into next year. I think he'll be back. And then in the secondary, by the way, our star of the month, Tyler Hall. I totally glossed over that. I think this is the player Raiders fans are listening to, waiting to hear my opinion on him. He has completely come out of nowhere, and this is now the third guy on this list that's just a street free agent pickup that's been a complete gem for them. We talked about Illuminor and Billings, but Tyler Hall, they pluck him off the Rams practice squad, and he's been like a dominant slot corner for these Raiders. Went in and looked back on him. He comes out of Wyoming. He's only 5'9", 190 pounds, but this guy 4'4", 140, 38 vertical jump, put up 17 on the bench, almost 120 something plus on the broad jump. He's a good athlete, man, and he's getting an opportunity to play in the slot. They've had some injuries there with guys like Rock Ya-Sin. And Tyler Hall has broken up 4 passes. He's not getting beat in coverage. He's been a menace as a run defender from the slot. This could be your kind of classic undrafted diamond in the rough from a small school that makes a name for himself as a slot corner in this league. Now, it's interesting because the 3 corners that are playing right now kind of profile slot guys. Now, Nate Hobbs is going to go down. He's stepped outside much more this season and has not been as good as he was in his rookie year, where he looked like one of the ascending best slot corners in the league. So there is a little bit of a dilemma there. And it's not that Nate Hobbs has been terrible on the outside, but he's been far from good. He's been giving up, a good 3-4 catches a game on average for about 40-50 yards. Just hasn't really been a lockdown guy on the outside, far from it. So that is something to kind of keep an eye on. How do they view that situation as far as who their slot guy is next year? But you got to bring Tyler Hall back based on how he's playing. But is that going to come at the cost of Nate Hobbs? I think that's a fascinating conversation, because you'd rather have Nate Hobbs be your superstar slot corner with how well he played. But anyway, Meek Robertson, I said he profiles as a slot guy because he's 5'8", but that's not really his skill set. We're finding that out. Now, luckily, slot corner is not a not a position of need for the Raiders, quite clearly. Perimeter corner is, and in the last month, he's been more outside, and he's settling in a little bit. He's been beat for sure. I don't see him as a starter, but his tape was really good coming out of college. They spent a 4th-round pick on him. I think he can be a good 4th corner, someone that they can maybe use as a dime back and get into the mix for next season with how he's playing right now. And that's all we've got. Voila, which has become the buzzword for the end of these videos. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you drop your comments down below on players you agree, disagree, or maybe felt were left off. One last reminder, make sure you do like the video. If you're still here and you have not, literally, what the hell are you doing? Give me a little support, give me a little love, hit that like button, and thank you. We'll see you guys on Friday for the NFC version. Peace out.